Chapter 104. Yin Tuo's son Yin Shu? Ferdinand was surprised. Yin Tuo is willing to let his precious son go to Monster Ghost region for the trial? It's his business whether he's willing or not, and I can't control it. However, Yin Shu told me personally that he's going too, so it can't be fake. I have a grudge against him and you know that. I'm afraid I'll be in danger if I go to Monster Ghost region with him. Yu Qianqiu said as he gestured at his neck with his hand. Ferdinand was silent. If Yin Shu really wanted to kill Yu Qianqiu in Monster Ghost region, it wouldn't be difficult. With his core formation late-stage cultivation, it wouldn't take him much effort to kill a foundation establishment stage disciple. What's more, no one could say for sure who killed a disciple in the demon domain. Yu Qianqiu, for this trial in Monster Ghost region, our Wanfen garden isn't as good as the other branches, but we've chosen a disciple from each of the nascent soul, core formation, and foundation establishment stages to participate. You know all three of them. Follow them closely. With Yin Shu's core formation stage cultivation, he can't do anything to you. Ferdinand pondered as he stroked his beard. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. He was waiting for this. Although he wasn't afraid of Yin Shu, it was better to have more people than none. He got up from the chair and said with a smile, "Then I'll have to trouble Elder Fei. I'll go back and make preparations first." With that he swaggered out. Time passed quickly. The three people in Utopia had different thoughts about Yu Qianqiu going to Monster Ghost region. Guan Yu knew how high the death rate of Fushan Island was. He was a little worried but he didn't say much. Qin Feng was very loyal to Boss. In his heart, Boss was omnipotent and he worshipped her blindly. Bai Suzhen only had one sentence: "Call me out when you're in danger." In front of the Alchemy Pavilion's main hall, 15 disciples of different cultivation levels were ready to go, surrounded by a group of disciples watching. Guan Weiwu, who rarely appeared, was standing on the steps, looking at the disciples with a serious expression. Although he had seen such scenes many times, he couldn't help but feel a little emotional. He didn't know how many people would come back alive. With a sweep of his gaze, his disciple Yu Qianqiu was hiding at the back of the group of 5 foundation establishment cultivators, looking around. Compared to the others, he had an indifferent look. His mentality was not bad. Guan Weiwu nodded approvingly and waved to the crowd. "Let's go, follow me to Penglai Pavilion." Guan Weiwu was the first to fly into the air, followed by the 15 disciples. 15 long swords were unsheathed at the same time. Shwa shwa shwa. Their imposing manner was astonishing. In an instant, they stepped on their swords and followed Elder Guan. Many of the surrounding disciples were shaking their heads and sighing. They sighed at how many of these people had gone, and how many of them had returned. There were also some disciples who revealed expressions of amazement and envy when they saw the seniors step on their swords together. Most of these people were disciples who hadn't reached the foundation establishment stage, so they didn't consider the dangers of the seniors' trip. Instead, they envied the seniors' ability to fly on their swords. The kind of mountain you stand on, the kind of firewood you cut. This sentence was very reasonable. In the crowd, Ling Feng and the other 2 watched Yu Qianqiu fly at the back and sighed endlessly. They were also depressed. When did he become an outstanding disciple? In front of Penglai Pavilion's main hall, when Guan Weiwu arrived with his people, there were already many people standing there. There were more people arriving one after another. Each faction stood in their own place, and the ones standing in front of each faction were the elders in charge of each faction. Yu Qianqiu craned his head and looked around. There were about 300 to 400 people here, and the Cultivation Pavilion faction standing at the easternmost side had the most people. There was a huge pile of people standing there. Their faction alone probably accounted for half of the people here. There were dozens of elders standing on the steps of the main hall. The sect master in the middle, Feng Xiangtian, looked at everyone with a solemn expression. An elder whispered a few words in his ear and he nodded. The elder took out a small compass with a leg stand from his storage bag, shot a white light at it and threw it forward. The compass instantly became as big as a dining table and stood in front of the main hall. The elder then cupped his hands towards the elders in charge of each faction and made a gesture of invitation. At this time, the cultivation pavilion on the east side moved first. The elders in charge of the faction led the disciples toward the compass. Yu Qianqiu did his best to crane his head. He really wanted to see what exactly was going on. Unfortunately, there were too many people and his line of sight was blocked. It wasn't until it was the Alchemy Pavilion's turn that Yu Qianqiu's curiosity was satisfied. It was like a big drum, and it was filled with dense horizontal and vertical lines like a chessboard. There were 4 palm-shaped ears in each of the 4 directions. When they got closer, The elder kept reminding the disciples to place their palms on the ears of the compass and insert a strand of divine sense. After the insertion was successful, the ears of the compass would flash with a white light. After Yu Qianqiu did as he was told, he thought to himself, "What is this thing?" Each time, people could insert their divine sense at the same time. It took a few hundred people less than an hour to finish. The elder used a spell to put away the compass. Soon after, 9 elders walked down the steps from behind the sect master. The 10 elders stood in a row and bowed to the sect master. According to Yu Qianqiu's estimation, it should be time for the gang leader to speak. Unexpectedly, Feng Xiangtian raised his hand and took out a small boat. He used a spell and threw it into the air. The small boat grew in the wind above everyone's heads. After a few moments, a big boat blocked the sky above everyone's heads and it was dark below. Feng Xiangtian used another spell. The bottom of the big boat split open and a floor appeared in front of the hall. It formed a staircase leading to the cabin. Feng Xiangtian nodded to the 10 elders. 5 of them immediately came out and took the stairs to board the boat. The other 5 guarded the stairs. The cultivation pavilion started, and the disciples of each faction also started to board the boat. Before Yu Qianqiu boarded the boat, he looked at his master affectionately. Then he turned around and boarded the boat. When he got on the boat, he realized that the boat was really big. An elder came over to instruct them to sit cross-legged with their own faction's people. There weren't even stools, so they just sat on the floor. He just happened to sit on the wall of the boat. When the other 5 elders came up, they announced that everyone had boarded. What made Yu Qianqiu a little depressed was that he wanted to listen to the spirit of the gang leader's speech. Unfortunately, Feng Xiangtian didn't say a word from beginning to end. He maintained the dignity of a sect leader very well. When the surrounding scenery changed, everyone knew that the boat was already on the way to the demon ghost region. For a moment, many people's expressions became solemn. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Yan Shu, who was resting with his eyes closed. He turned around to look for the 3 female disciples of Wanfen Garden. He found them sitting at the very back. There was also a girl next to them who looked a little familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen her before. Senior Martial Brother Quan, is that Senior Martial Brother Guan's disciple? An elder asked the elder next to him. The elder who was referred to as Senior Brother Quan looked in the direction he was pointing at and saw Yu Qianqiu leaning against the wall of the ship, sleeping. There was a faint sheen of moisture at the corner of his mouth. On the other hand, the other disciples with high cultivation were resting with their eyes closed. Those with low cultivation were generally a little uneasy. Obviously, they were a little afraid of going to the demon ghost region. However, this was also human nature. Most of them were disciples who left the island for the first time. But that kid was a little too much. He could actually fall asleep and drool. Wasn't he worried at all? Elder Quan looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head slightly with a wry smile. That time in the alchemy pavilion, he was also one of the elders who watched Yu Qianqiu refine pills with the sect leader. How could he not know him? He turned his head and said to the person next to him, "Junior Martial Brother's son. It is Yu Qianqiu who Senior Martial Brother Guan asked us to take care of." Ah, this kid is a little interesting. He is really worthy of being Senior Martial Brother Guan's personal disciple. Elder Sun laughed. Another round of sun rose. An elder standing at the bow of the boat reached out his hand to block the dazzling sunlight. He looked into the distance and saw that the distant sky was covered with gloomy clouds. It seemed incompatible with the rising sun. He turned around and glanced at everyone in the cabin. He shouted in a deep voice, "The demon ghost region is in front of us. Everyone get ready." Chapter 105. Everyone in the cabin stood up, including Yu Qianqiu. He stood up with a start and wiped the liquid from the corner of his mouth. He stuck his head out of the side of the ship and looked around. The flying boat flew at high speed. Not long after, the white clouds in front of them were replaced by dark clouds. As they flew further, the land was shrouded in a dense fog, and the scenery on the ground was faintly discernible. As far as the eyes could see, it was a boundless haze, and it seemed extremely strange. The sound of the flying ship piercing through the air became louder and louder. It flew faster and faster as if it wanted to fly through the darkness below. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, a few sharp sounds came from afar. Many people's expressions changed as they looked towards the source of the sounds. There seemed to be a few flying ships in the sky above the clouds. They seemed to be flying in the same direction as the people from supporting Immortal Island. Everyone, don't panic. It's the other sects that are here to gain experience. The elder at the bow shouted at everyone. He turned back and squinted at the flying ship that was also flying over. Yu Qianqiu recognized him. This elder was the cultivation pavilion's Dongfang elder. His cultivation had reached the middle stage of the crossing calamity stage. Everyone felt relieved when they heard that it was the other sects that were here to gain experience. Not long after, 5 similar flying ships flew over and flew side by side with the supporting Immortal Island's ship. The 6 ships flew in the same direction. Damn it. Don't tell me that Ong Kwang-tsung is among them. I'm very famous in Ong Kwang-tsung. Almost everyone knows me. Yu Qianqiu looked carefully for a long time. He was relieved when he realized that they were all sects that he didn't know. A mountain that broke through the clouds suddenly appeared in front of them. It caused many people to exclaim that there was such a tall mountain. The 6 ships slowed down and flew to the peak of the mountain. They spread out in a hexagonal formation and stopped. Other than the Dongfang Elder, the other 9 elders of supporting Immortal Island jumped off the ship. People from the other sects also jumped off. Yu Qianqiu leaned on the side of the ship and watched. He saw the people from the other sects meeting as if they were discussing something. Then they quickly spread out. Light flashed continuously around the mountain peak. It was obvious that the sects were working together to set up some formation. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Elder Dongfang shouted from the bow, "All disciples disembark." Without a word, Yu Qianqiu climbed over the side of the ship and was the first to jump down. As soon as he landed, he saw a black shadow flash in front of him. There seemed to be something extra in his chest. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. He looked suspiciously at Elder Sun beside him. If he wasn't mistaken, it was this Elder Sun who had stuffed something into his chest. He reached his hand out to see what it was when a voice transmission suddenly sounded in his ear. "Don't look at it now, but there are 10 Vajra talismans inside. Each talisman can resist a late-stage nascent soul cultivator's attack for a quarter of an hour. It's enough for you to save your life 10 times in an emergency. There is also a jade stone from me and Elder Quan. If you really have no other choice, you can crush one of them and one of us will come to save you. Remember, don't use the jade stone unless you have no other choice. Otherwise, it'll be easy for others to find out that you're cheating. After descending the mountain, don't go more than 500 kilometers away from the foot of the mountain. Remember, don't go south. That direction leads to the center of the demon domain. There are all kinds of powerful demons and ghosts there. Even a late-stage transcending tribulation cultivator can't guarantee their safety. Boy, remember my words well. Don't waste your master's efforts." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He looked at Elder Sun who was beside him and then at Elder Quan who was not far away. The 2 of them were the same as the other elders who had come this time. They were both elders of the cultivation pavilion. It turned out that his master had already arranged for them to be spies. Yu Qianqiu was moved. He silently nodded. Elder Sun glanced at him and walked away without saying a word. Originally, all the disciples were sitting together on the ship, but after jumping off the ship, they scattered. Yu Qianqiu didn't notice that there was a disciple from the alchemy pavilion next to him. He looked around and was startled. Yan Shu was looking at him with a sneer. There were more than 10 people standing behind him. They were obviously in cahoots with some bastard. Yu Qianqiu's face darkened. "That's Elder Yan's disciple from the utility hall. Yu Qianqiu, you're in big trouble." A woman's voice came from behind him. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and immediately said happily, "Ancestor Ko, Martial Uncle Morong, Senior Sister Mei, long time no see. I missed you so much." They were the 3 disciples sent by Wanfen Garden to gain experience. As soon as he finished speaking, a beautiful woman standing next to the 3 acquaintances covered her mouth and giggled. There were too many beautiful women in Wanfen Garden. They often hung out together, so Yu Qianqiu's nerves were a bit numb. Looking at beautiful women was like looking at cabbages. He glanced at them indifferently and asked, "This is? I don't think I've seen you in Wanfen Garden before." The woman stopped laughing and introduced herself, "Early stage core formation Xiaowanqing. We've met before in Wanfen Garden's main hall. At the time, my master Elder Chiu and I were treating Furong's leg injury." "What? You don't remember anything?" "I remember now. So it's Martial Uncle Xiao." Yu Qianqiu slapped his forehead and bowed. Xiaowanqing smiled nonchalantly and glanced at the 4 of them. Her eyes turned into crescents. "My safe pavilion doesn't have many people to begin with. This time they only sent me out to gain experience. I see that the 4 of you want to go together. I happen to have no one by myself. Can you bring me along?" "Welcome, welcome." Yu Qianqiu wanted as many people as possible. Plus, it was a core formation cultivator. He immediately welcomed her warmly. Then he turned around and raised his chin in Yan Shu's direction. "If you have people, so do I. Plus, they are the 4 beauties. Yan Shu sneered disdainfully, turned around and ignored him. The 6 flying shuttles floating in the air were all put away. The 6 sects gathered at the top of the mountain and it immediately became lively. There was a place where hundreds of beauties gathered. It immediately caught Xianxia's attention. Other than the Moon Clan, which only accepted female disciples, there was no other sect like this. When he looked at the other sects, Xianxia saw a familiar face. He choked. Years ago in the 100 Flowers Valley, he drank with a guy who called himself 10,000 Demons Xuanhuan. That guy mocked him a little, so he had a deep impression of his face. Who else could this person be if not Xuanhuan? What's going on? Why are the diabolical sects and the righteous sects together? Looking at how arrogant this old guy is in that group, he seems to have a high status. Did I mistake him for someone else? The more Xianxia looked at him, the more he felt that he was right. He looked exactly the same as the Xuanhuan in his memory. That Xuanhuan seemed to feel that someone was observing him. He suddenly turned around and looked arrogant. When he saw Xianxia, he was also stunned. Then he smiled and nodded in a friendly manner. Damn. He smiled at me. It really is the 10,000 Demons Xuanhuan. Xianxia was already sure that it was him. Looking at the clothes of the people around him, he was definitely from the same sect. Ancestor Ko. Are my eyes playing tricks on me? Why do I see people from the 10,000 demons here too? Xianxia turned around and said in surprise. The righteous sects and diabolical sects had always been incompatible. Now they were actually training together. He couldn't help but be surprised. Chapter 106. Ko Xuanhuan, who was at the nascent soul stage, had the appearance of a charming young woman. She looked at Xianxia with surprise. In the supporting immortal island, disciples with low cultivation like him had never come into contact with the cultivation world before they started cultivating. Very few of them had ever left the island. How could he recognize someone from the myriad devil's palace? Then she remembered that he was a lone cultivator and understood. He nodded and said, "They are indeed people from the myriad demon's palace. The supporting immortal island, the Daluo sect, and the Moon sect are the top 3 sects of the righteous Tao and the top 3 sects of the demonic Tao. The myriad demon's palace, blood demon palace, and corpse sect are all here. Most of the disciples of the 6 major sects who have participated in the trial in the demon ghost domain will keep their mouths shut about this matter, so you don't know. I participated in it when I was in the foundation establishment and core formation stages, so I know more than you." Those who had not experienced this before looked at each other in dismay. No one had expected that there would be such a secret in the demon domain trial. TSK. This was the 3rd time Martial Ancestor Ko. Looks like you'll be the next chief elder of Wanfan Garden when we get back. Xianxia wasn't trying to flatter him. This was the rule of the supporting immortal island. Those who could survive the 3 calamities at the 3 cultivation stages would mostly be nurtured as the successor of the main branch. If there were many competitors, as long as their cultivation reached a certain level, they would at least become an elder. If Xianxia knew that his master, Guan Weiwu, also wanted him to go through 3 trials and take over as the next chief elder, what would he think? Let's not talk about the future. It's more important to go back alive. Ko Xuanhuan slowly looked down the mountain. She seemed to be thinking of something. The Blood Demon Palace's strength is indeed extraordinary. They are competing with the Blue Light School over there, and they still have the mood to participate in the demon domain trials here. Xianxia looked at the group of people in blood-red clothes and laughed. Then, his gaze fell on a group of people from the righteous sect dressed in khaki-colored clothes. His eyes narrowed slightly as he asked in a deep voice, "Ancestral Master Ko, are those people in yellow the disciples of the exalted sect?" Ko Xuanhuan looked back and nodded. "Yes. Daluo sect. I've heard a lot about you." Xianxia said word by word. A cold light flashed in his squinted eyes. Elder Dongfang Chang'eo was the host of this trial. After meeting with the other 5 sects, he came back to see his own sect's disciples forming their own groups, hoping that they could survive this ordeal safely with their numbers. The white-haired Dongfang Chang'eo stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He frowned and snorted coldly. After that, a powerful aura pressed down on the disciples of the supporting immortal island. Xianxia felt as though his blood was about to burst out from his 7 apertures. In an instant, everyone quieted down. The aura disappeared without a trace. Dongfang Chang'eo took out the compass from his storage bag and placed it in front of him. He looked at everyone and said, 3 months for nascent soul cultivators, 2 months for core formation cultivators, and 1 month for foundation establishment cultivators. I, Dongfang Chang'eo, and the other 9 elders will await your return. However, those who don't pass the time limit are not allowed to go up the mountain. Otherwise they will be killed. After that, he cast a spell at the compass. The surface of the compass flashed. He waved his hand and shouted, "All disciples participating in the trial, go down the mountain." No one dared to hesitate. They all jumped down the mountain. When Yu Qianqiu showed the compass to the 4 girls, he couldn't help but take a look. He saw that the light spots on the compass were moving. It turned out to be a magic treasure that knew where people were. Those who had inserted their divine sense into the compass would be shown on it. The sound of footsteps could be heard. The disciples of the other sects had also started to descend the mountain. No one dared to fly. In this place, flying fast was useless. Perhaps even if they flew fast, they would also die fast. The most important thing was to muddle through the time and return safely. The yin fog was thick like clouds. It was locked in the middle of the mountain. The upper half of the mountain was still sunny, but the lower half of the mountain was covered by the black fog. It was like a rainy day. Not to mention the fact that the yin fog was much dimmer. The yin fog blocked people's vision. Occasionally, 1 or 2 strange screams could be heard. The mountain became more and more rugged as they went down. It was like they were in a different world. Some people like xuanhuan, who had experience in the devil's domain, drew their weapons. Even the newbies who were affected by the experience also drew their weapons. The atmosphere was so heavy that it was scary. Damn it, it was full of yin energy. It was worthy of the name Demon Region. Yu Qianqiu held a sword in his hand and looked around for Yan Shu and the others. It was better not to be attacked by that bastard. Xuanhuan said softly, "Don't stop here. Go down the mountain quickly." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He also said softly, "Grandmaster, it's a bit scary at the bottom of the mountain. Let's just hide here. It'll be convenient to go back when we have enough time. We can also take less risks. What do you think?" Although Xiao Wanqing, Murong Xian, and Mei Yinhong didn't say anything, they all nodded in agreement with Yu Qianqiu. It was dark at the bottom of the mountain, but it was indeed a bit scary. When they looked back, they would know that there were many people from various sects who had the same idea. They all stopped and planned to stay here for a long time. Xuanhuan said a little angrily, "Let's go. The demons and ghosts here are most fond of blood. We have figured out the rules of the trial held every 5 years by the 6 major sections. Moreover, there is no place to hide on the mountainside. It will be crowded with people. It will be hard to escape if there is an accident." Yu Qianqiu and the other 3 women looked at each other in dismay. They then looked at the other sects and saw that there were already people rushing down the mountain without stopping. They seemed to be older people, and it was likely that they were people with experience in trials. Seeing that the 4 people were still in a daze, Xuanhuan stamped her feet and said, "If you don't go, I'll go first." She turned and walked down the mountain. To be honest, if Ferdinand hadn't repeatedly told her that it would be safer for her to get rid of Yu Qianqiu with her cultivation, it would be a burden to protect people with low cultivation like him. "Don't. Grandmaster, wait for us." Yu Qianqiu shouted softly. The 4 people already believed her and hurriedly followed Xuanhuan. After walking for a short while, although he had walked quite a distance, it was a pity that he was still a little too late. Suddenly there were sounds similar to that of birds flying in the sky. There were also sounds similar to the squeaking of mice. Following that, the sounds increased in number and density until they could be heard everywhere. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the scattered trees that grew strangely in 2s and 3s. He didn't know where the sound came from. "It's the bloodthirsty demon hunters. Everyone keep quiet. Cover each other and quickly go down the mountain," Xuanhuan ordered. The 4 people hurriedly followed her words and moved quickly. The 4 women surrounded Yu Qianqiu, who had the weakest cultivation, and quickly walked down the mountain. In the distant sky there was darkness at first, and then an overwhelming number of red dots covered the sky. They flew over the 5 people and rushed to the mountainside. Yu Qianqiu looked up and found that the red dots were actually the eyes of bats. A large group of black bats the size of wash basins were squeaking ferociously. It made people's hands and feet numb and scared. Fortunately, they ran fast. This time, those guys on the mountain who wanted to take advantage of the situation were doomed. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. It seemed that he had the same idea as them just now, but he had forgotten. Sure enough, there were screams everywhere on the mountainside. "Bats! Bats! Such big bats! Ah!" There were already people screaming. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and looked. In the distance there were sword rays everywhere. The people on the mountainside were already fighting with the bats. The shrill cries of the bats were mixed with the occasional screams of someone. It was a little hard to listen to. Some people actually wanted to escape on their swords. But as soon as they flew up, they were surrounded by the bats. They screamed and fell from the sky. Yu Qianzhou saw this and cursed in his heart. What idiots! With so many people protecting them, they might not be able to do anything to them. Trying to escape would make them die faster. The people on the mountainside had probably learned from those who wanted to escape. They started to fight calmly. Gradually there were no more screams. Dang! Yu Qianzhou was startled by the crisp sound beside him. Wouldn't it kill him to make a sound at this time? He turned around and saw that Mei Yinhong was observing the situation on the mountainside from time to time. She accidentally touched the rock beside her with her sword. The 5 people looked up at the sky at the same time. If they had waited for a while longer, all the bats would have reached the mountainside. But now there were only a few hundred bats in the sky. They were flapping their wings and floating in the air. He glared at the 5 of them with a ferocious expression with his bright red eyes. *CK. What the hell is this unlucky girl doing? Sigh. Yu Qianzhou groaned in pain. Chapter 107. Squeak squeak. It was like the sound of an attack horn. The blood-sucking demon bats the size of wash basins scattered in the air. Along with the rapid cries, hundreds of demon bats condensed into a whirlwind and rushed down. Yu Qianzhou, who was a little worried at the beginning, completely calmed down in the face of the upcoming fierce battle. Under his calm appearance, a long-lost passion surged through his limbs. In his mind, a person holding 2 machetes appeared in a corner of the city, rushing towards a group of people. Wherever he went, blood would spurt out, accompanied by the cries of his opponents. The bloody wounds on his body would also increase, but at that time, there was only one thought: kill. A long-suppressed killing intent boiled in his chest, and a domineering aura instantly spread out. Yu Qianzhou looked at the hundreds of blood-sucking demon bats in the sky and trembled with excitement. The 4 women around him also noticed his abnormality. Even Xuanhuan, who was at the nascent soul stage, felt a little uncomfortable from the special aura he emitted. You guys guard the surroundings, leave the rest to me. Yu Qianzhou's tone was unquestionable. Looking at the demon bats that swooped down with their fangs bared, he pointed 2 fingers at the sky and shouted, "Kill!" As soon as the sword in his hand flew out, 2 cold lights immediately rushed out from his storage bag. The 3 sword lights cooperated with each other and spun in a circle. They were as fast as lightning and rushed towards the demon bats. Squeak squeak. The group of demon bats that rushed down let out a series of sorrowful cries and were quickly dismembered into minced meat, accompanied by a rain of blood. The demon bats' whirlwind-like attack formation was immediately scattered. They flew into the air and flapped their wings. This attack caused nearly 100 demon bats to die. Women love to be clean, but at this critical moment they couldn't dodge. The 4 of them were immediately drenched in a rain of minced meat and blood. Other than Xuanhuan, the 3 women all forgot about the danger they were in. They bitterly touched the minced meat on their heads, afraid that it would fall off their hands. Xuanhuan looked at the 3 flying swords in the sky in surprise. They were actually controlling 3 swords at the same time. What a good coordination. Obviously, the power of each sword was not much, but when they worked together, they had such great lethality. Did Fushan Island have such a sword technique? Why haven't I seen anyone use it before? The demon bats squeaked and swooped down again. This time they had learned their lesson and rushed over in all directions. Yu Qianzhou shouted, "Come on!" His fingers formed a seal, and the 3 flying swords in the air moved as fast as lightning, like a jade maiden shuttling back and forth in all directions. It was obviously 3 flying swords, but when the 4 girls looked up, it was as if there were flying swords everywhere above their heads. Brilliant lights overflowed in all directions, appearing and disappearing one after another, extremely dazzling. One by one, the black shadows were pierced by the white light, smashing heavily onto the ground. Squeak squeak. Of the hundreds of demon bats, only a dozen or so were left in such a short period of time. They didn't dare to come anymore and fled in panic. Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly. Trying to run? His fingers moved and a dozen or so cold lights flashed in the air. The dozen or so fleeing demon bats lost their momentum in the blink of an eye. They paused in the air for a moment and then fell down stiffly. Yu Qianzhou stopped his hand seals. He clenched his fist and shouted, "Withdraw." The long sword returned to its scabbard, and the other 2 cold lights flashed into the storage bag. The girls looked at each other. They originally thought it would be troublesome. After all, there were more demon bats. Who knew that before they could even make a move, Yu Qianzhou, a Foundation Establishment stage disciple, would be able to single-handedly deal with them. Xuanhuan frowned and thought for a while, then looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, I remember, I seem to have seen a spell that can control multiple swords at the same time in the scripture pavilion. I think it's called Guiyuan sword spell. Are you practicing this sword spell? Yu Qianqiu himself was also very satisfied with the sword spell's debut. He nodded and smiled. Grandmaster Ko's eyes are really sharp, seeing through it at a glance. The other three girls looked at each other and Xiao Wanqing sighed softly. What a beautiful sword spell. Mei Yinhong nodded repeatedly in agreement. Yes, yes. Foundation establishment stage cultivators can practice this kind of sword spell? Why didn't I know about it before? When I go back, I must find it to practice. In fact, all women liked flashy but impractical things, but there was a condition, and that was, it must be beautiful. That's not right. Ko Xuanhuan shook her head and frowned. Guiyuan sword spell, I have carefully studied it before. It is impossible for it to have such great power, especially with such an unbelievable speed, not to mention your cultivation level is at the foundation establishment stage. The other three girls heard this and looked at him suspiciously. Yu Qianqiu smiled in disdain. Did you even need to say that? Big sister already said that this sword art's power was not enough, so I risked almost going berserk to improve it. I fused in two of the most powerful elements. One, unity is strength and mutual cooperation is important. The other is what the martial arts novels in his previous life say, in the world of martial arts, only speed is unbeatable. But this is personal privacy, I can't tell you. Want to learn Guiyuan sword spell? Go to the scripture pavilion and slowly learn it. Seeing that he smiled and didn't answer, Ko Xuanhuan also didn't want to waste time on this question. She said to the others, let's hurry down the mountain and find a place to hide, otherwise it will be troublesome when it gets dark. They looked back at the battle between humans and bats on the mountainside and didn't know when it would end, but they didn't care anymore. After all, their own lives were more important than others, so they hurriedly followed Ko Xuanhuan down the mountain. Generally speaking, Yanshu was very lucky. Of the 15 disciples sent by his father from the Sundries Hall, 7 had participated in the Demon Ghost Realms trial. When they reached the mountainside, the seniors decisively led him down the mountain. When he saw the sky full of demon bats flying to the mountainside, Yanshu was secretly shocked. Although demon bats weren't powerful things, they couldn't withstand so many of them together. Along the way, in the gloomy atmosphere, various kinds of demon beasts appeared from time to time to attack, either alone or in groups. Yanshu followed the seniors and the experts of other sects all the way to the foot of the mountain, leaving behind piles of demon beasts' corpses. Now he finally understood why his father didn't let him come here for the trial before. This time he reported his name behind his father's back, which caused his father to be furious. He didn't deny that this impulse was all because of Yu Qianqiu. First, he wanted to kill Yu Qianqiu to vent his anger. Second, it was because Yu Qianqiu made him lose face several times in the alchemy pavilion, causing many disciples to treat him as a joke. He wanted to use this trial to regain some face. Now that the thought of revenge was gone, it didn't matter if he lost face or not. His only thought was to find a way to survive and return to supporting Immortal Island alive. He shouldn't have come. At that time he was too impulsive. He didn't think about it. Since Yu Qianqiu was here, even if he didn't kill him, what chance did he have to go back? Even if he went back, he wouldn't have a chance to take revenge in the future. Not only was he depressed, but the seniors who were always protecting him were also depressed. It was good enough that he could ensure his own survival in the demon ghost domain. Now he had to spend effort to protect others. It was really a headache. But he was Elder Yan's precious son. Before coming here, Elder Yan had repeatedly reminded them. The meaning of his words was nothing more than hinting to them that they could get into trouble, but nothing could happen to his son. Otherwise he wouldn't forgive them when he came back. The sky was getting dark and it was also the time when the biggest crisis was coming. Once they reached the foot of the mountain, the people from the various sects found the people who were most beneficial to them and formed small teams. There were even many people who abandoned their own sects and formed teams with experts from other sections. They looked for places to hide in order to survive the terrifying night in the demon ghost domain. On the mountain peak, the various sects carried the divine sense compass to check the situation of their disciples. Dongfang Chang'ao and the elders of supporting Immortal Island stared at the compass with a heavy expression. More than 10 light spots on the compass had disappeared. This meant that more than 10 disciples from supporting Immortal Island had died. There were also a few light spots that were very dim. Needless to say, they were definitely seriously injured. They looked at the sky and saw that it wasn't dark yet. Elder Quan and Elder Sun, who were staring at the compass, heaved a sigh of relief. The light spot that represented Xianxia was still very bright. This meant that this kid was still alive and well. He was able to survive the first wave of demonic beasts. Obviously, this kid wasn't as useless as senior brother Guan said. The two elders looked at each other at the same time. Chapter 108. The five of them descended the mountain smoothly and did not encounter any more danger. Along the way, the corpses of demonic beasts could be seen everywhere, either scattered or in groups. There was not a single living demonic beast to be seen. Clearly, the people who went down the mountain first had killed their way down, clearing the obstacles for the people behind them, saving them a lot of effort. The sky was about to turn dark, and the entire demonic ghost region was hazy and gloomy. The old trees around them were in strange shapes, and the occasional cry of an old bird could be heard from afar. Xiao and the other two girls looked a little pale. They peeked at their surroundings from time to time, but they did not dare to look openly. Clearly, the surrounding atmosphere was affecting them greatly. Xianxia looked around and sighed. This place was the best place to shoot a horror film. It would be a waste if they did not make use of it. Xuanhuan kept urging them to move faster. Her expression was very anxious. Xianxia caught up with her and turned his head to suggest, "Ancestor Ko, let's just use sword kinesis flight." No. Xuanhuan rejected immediately. "We do not know how many things are around here. If we fly, we will immediately become a target. We will not be able to survive the night. Then we might as well hide here. There are people halfway up the mountain, and the others have already gone down the mountain. We will not be an obvious target if we hide here. It should be safer." Xianxia looked around and said. Xuanhuan shook her head again and rejected, "No, the entire mountain is the most dangerous place now. With so many dead demonic beasts, just the smell of blood will spread for dozens of miles. When night falls, all kinds of demonic ghosts will gather here to look for food. At that time, all kinds of things will be scattered all over the mountain. Where can you hide?" Xianxia thought it made sense, so he did not speak anymore. The few of them rushed down the mountain. The five of them hurriedly ran, and when the sky darkened, the girls gave up on their womanly modesty. They lifted their skirts with both hands and started running. Xianxia sized them up a few times. It was a pity that they were all wearing long pants, or else he would have gotten a good look. Just as they were about to reach the foot of the mountain, the five of them stopped abruptly. Looking around, they saw densely packed green lights flashing. At the foot of the mountain, a group of red-haired dog-like creatures surrounded the mountain with their green eyes. "What is this?" Everyone's expressions changed as they looked at Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan said sullenly, "The blood wolves are the most numerous demonic beasts in the fiend domain. They should have been attracted by the smell of blood on the mountain." They immediately picked up their swords again. Howl. The leader of the pack, a strong blood wolf, had also discovered them. It caused the leader to howl, and immediately the howls of the wolves rose and fell. After the howling, one or two blood wolves took the lead and rushed towards them. Following that, the rest of the blood wolves swarmed over as well. From where they were standing, they could see that there were too many wolves moving up and down like the waves of the sea. "Kill the fish that slipped through the net. Don't let them get close," Xianxia shouted in a low voice. In such a situation, he had unknowingly placed himself in the role of a commander. Without waiting for the wolves to run over, he decisively released 3 flying swords. 3 sword flares flashed into the wolf pack and slaughtered wantonly. Wherever the sword flares went, the group of beast stomachs and intestines flowed out as they collapsed. However, there were too many of them. No matter how fast Xianxia's flying swords were, they could not stop the wolves from charging forward without any regard for their lives. The 4 women immediately sent their flying swords over. The 7 flying swords were like chopping melons and vegetables. The corpses of the wolves gradually piled up. However, there were too many wolves. In addition, compared to ordinary wolves, the blood wolves were faster and more agile. The blood wolves that could not rush over directly cleverly circled around from the sides. Not long after, they surrounded the 5 of them. Instantly, it caused a lot of trouble for them. As the attack range expanded, more and more blood wolves slipped through the net. The few of them had no choice but to reduce the attack range of the flying swords. They could not care less about killing the blood wolves. It was already fortunate that they could not let the blood wolves near them. At this moment, someone on the mountain shouted, "Are the disciples of Supporting Immortals Island down there?" Xianxia diverted his attention to look. There were probably close to 1,000 people rushing down from the mountain. Needless to say, they must be the disciples who were surrounded by the bloodthirsty demon bats. Coincidentally, Xianxia knew the person who shouted just now. He immediately replied loudly, Gu Qingyun, stop talking nonsense. Come and help. While he was distracted, more than 10 blood wolves rushed over. He quickly focused his attention to kill them and defend his side. Gu Qingyun was none other than the person who extorted 2 top-grade spirit stones from Yu Qianqiu in the sutra depository. When Gu Qingyun heard the contents of Yu Qianqiu's shout, he was startled. Coincidentally, Yu Qianqiu turned his head back and he couldn't tell who it was. However, judging from the robes of the 5 people and the fact that that person was able to call out his name, there was no doubt that they were disciples of the supporting Immortal Island. Gu Qingyun held the long sword in his hand and turned to the disciples of the various sections. He raised his arms and shouted, "Our cultivation is low. No one knows if we can go back alive. But after the battle just now, I think we must understand a principle. Only by being united can we have hope to survive. Everyone help the disciples of supporting Immortal's Island to escape. If you have any difficulties in the future, the disciples of supporting Immortal's Island will not stand idly by. Those who are not willing to help, I will not force them. Those who are willing to help, follow me and kill." Gu Qingyun shouted and suddenly turned around. He took the lead and ran down the mountain. The flying sword in his hand turned into a stream of light and shot towards the blood wolves. The disciples of supporting Immortal's Island immediately released their flying swords and rushed down. The disciples of the various sects also knew that Gu Qingyun was speaking the truth. If it was not for everyone's unity at the waist of the mountain, it was unknown how many of them would have survived. Immediately, most of them rushed down together. A small portion of them wanted to go around the blood wolves and go down the mountain. But looking at the sky, they did not dare to go. Who knew what was in front of them? It was safer to have more people. Thus, they helplessly rushed down. Damn it! This kid can really bewitch people's hearts. He is a talent. Yu Qianqiu also heard Gu Qingyun's words. Nearly 1,000 people rushed down and immediately helped the 5 of them out of trouble. Gu Qingyun directly walked to Yu Qianqiu's side. He wanted to see who was the familiar person who told him to stop talking nonsense. After seeing clearly, he said in astonishment, "It's you?" "That's me." Yu Qianqiu nodded and laughed. He thought to himself, if I don't speak to you in a very familiar tone, who knows if you will come down. Gu Qingyun coldly snorted and turned his head to focus on controlling his sword to kill the wolves. With so many cultivators attacking, the blood wolves immediately suffered a great loss. Not long after, the remaining nearly 10,000 blood wolves all retreated far away and surrounded the group. But the nature of wolves was ferocious and would not give up until they achieved their goals. They would never easily give up on their prey. A whoa. First, there was a wolf's howl, followed by a wave of howls. Finally, all the blood wolves were howling. Not long after, wolf howls came from everywhere in the distance. From the sounds, it seemed like they were all gathering here. Are they summoning their own kind? Everyone was bewildered. This was going to be troublesome. Indeed, not long after, green eyes were everywhere in the distance. A wave of killing intent was gathered here, and there were rustling sounds everywhere. The sky was almost dark. It was hazy and the appearance of the wolves could not be seen clearly. They could only see that there were constantly glowing green eyes filling up the wolf pack that surrounded the group. Everyone, regardless of whether they were from the orthodox Tao or the demonic Tao, became a little nervous. Yu Qianqiu turned his head and said to Gu Qingyun with a smile, "I didn't expect a group of cultivators to be trapped by a pack of wolves. Have you heard of such a thing before?" He was not nervous at all. If it really couldn't be done, he could run to Utopia to hide. Gu Qingyun could not be bothered with him. It was not worth it to be trapped for this scoundrel. He was quite regretful. Suddenly, a few people in the crowd flew up on streams of light. However, before they could leave everyone's line of sight, they saw a few beams of red light soar into the sky. Those people screamed as they were engulfed by the red light. Everyone was secretly alarmed. Some of the people who had the same thoughts immediately calmed down. People often say that a general success is achieved through 10,000 corpses. A faint singing voice suddenly came from afar. When it landed in Yu Qianqiu's ears, it sounded like the singing of a Beijing opera. He could not help but be surprised. Everyone listened attentively. Who had the guts to sing here? When the singing voice sounded, the surrounding wolf pack became restless, appearing abnormally uneasy. Helplessly, unfavorable times. The singing voice continued and seemed to be getting closer. The wolf pack also underwent a huge change. Like dogs that had been beaten up, they howled softly and fled with their tails between their legs. Not long after, the tens of thousands of wolves that surrounded them all ran away, leaving only corpses all over the ground. Everyone was even more astonished. who could actually scare off a pack of wolves with just a song. Yu Qianqiu suddenly realized that something was wrong with Ko Shuahua, who was beside him. He could not help but ask, "Grandmaster Ko, do you know who's singing?" When the people nearby heard that, they all looked at her. Ko Shuahua bit her lips hard and said word by word, "Ghost? General? Army?" Chapter 109. It was their first time coming to the demon region and they had no experience. Otherwise, they would have run away like the others instead of being trapped by the wolves. Naturally, they didn't know who the ghost general was. However, from Ko Shuahua's tone, they could tell that the so-called ghost general was not a kind person. A core-bearing stage disciple of Fuxian Island sneered, "Ghost general? He's only equivalent to the core-bearing stage. We have so many people here and Uncle Master Ko is at the nascent soul stage. Why should we be afraid of this monster? Let's leave now and see what he can do to us." "We can't leave. Everyone who came here can't leave." Ko Shuahua shook her head sadly. "Ghost General is his title. In fact, his cultivation has reached the final stage of the Ghost King, which is equivalent to the final stage of our tribulation stage. He has hundreds of thousands of ghost soldiers and ghost generals under his command. He is the ruler of this area. I wonder why he came here today. Why did we bump into him? Are we fated to die here? Ghost King's cultivation in the final stage? Hundreds of thousands of ghost soldiers and ghost generals under his command?" Everyone was shocked and the disdainful disciple's face turned pale. Fortunately, it was dark and no one could see clearly. People became ghosts after they died, which was equivalent to mortals in the ghost realm. There was nothing to be afraid of. However, ghosts who had cultivated were different. Compared to human cultivation, ghost soldiers were equivalent to the chi refining stage, ghost leaders were equivalent to the foundation building stage, ghost general was equivalent to the core bearing stage, ghost marshal was equivalent to the nascent soul stage, and ghost king was equivalent to the tribulation stage. Now, a ghost king at the final stage with hundreds of thousands of soldiers and horses under his command had come. How could they survive? Yu Qianqiu had a toothache. Damn it. What kind of mess was this? A ghost king actually popped out. Wasn't this just scaring people? But I'm not afraid. I'll just run away. What can they do to me? Gu Qingyun suddenly asked, "Uncle Master Ko, you said that everyone who came here can't leave, including those who have left the mountain in advance?" He was naturally asking those who had experience in the demon region. Ko Shuahua was utterly disheartened. Where could they go? When the ghost general went on patrol in his territory, who could hide from him unless they were at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage? Who can escape? That's good. Gu Qingyun heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Those seniors who left first are really infuriating. Coming to such a dangerous place, they didn't even give us a warning and only knew to run away. If I were to die like this, I really wouldn't be able to take it lying down. Now it's all good. Don't even think about running away. Even if I die, I can die in peace." "That's right. That's right." Everyone nodded in agreement. Yu Qianqiu was too lazy to make a fuss. He pinched his chin with his fingers and stared at Gu Qingyun with a strange expression. Suddenly, he patted his shoulder and said angrily, "Gu Qingyun, didn't you say you're in the middle stage of the core formation realm? Damn it. So you're in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. How dare you pretend to be my martial uncle and cheat me of 2 high-grade spirit stones? Give me back my spirit stones." With a large number of essence chi pills, he reached the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm within a year at an extraordinary speed. Naturally, he could see that Gu Qingyun was still in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. When he heard him call Ko Shuahua Grandmaster, Yu Qianqiu was stunned. At first, he didn't pay attention, but after a while he realized that this guy was actually in the middle stage of the foundation building realm. Last time he suffered a great loss, bowing and giving spirit stones. Gu Qingyun narrowed his eyes and said, "That's strange. It seems like you were the one who pretended to be my senior martial brother first. Could it be that teaching you a lesson is wrong? I can't be bothered with you. Look at the situation now, yet you're still thinking about 2 spirit stones. If I can escape from the demon realm, let alone 2 spirit stones, I'll even give myself to you." TSK. You're the one who said it. If you can escape from the demon realm, you'll be mine." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed in a circle. Everyone heard it. "Help me be a witness." He said it himself. "Absolute idiot. Don't talk to me." Gu Qingyun turned around in disgust. Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This brother didn't know what situation he was in. First he was pestering for 2 spirit stones and now he was joking. However, everyone admired his calmness. Everyone's mood eased a lot. Someone even jeered, "As long as I can escape from the demon realm, I'll also give myself to you." Ah. Who said that just now? Yu Qianqiu stood on his tiptoes and pointed at someone. So it's a brother from the 10,000 demons. Phew. Remember what you said just now. Don't go back on your word. Everyone laughed as if they were watching a clown perform. They suddenly felt the fear in their hearts lessen. Someone shouted, "Count me in too." Ah. With one person taking the lead, everyone else jeered and shouted, "Count me in, count me in." They used this method to dispel the fear in their hearts. Well said, well said. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists and turned in a circle to return the greeting. "Count me in. Those who can escape, follow me. I guarantee that everyone will have a good life." No one believed that he was telling the truth. They all thought he was joking. Many people pushed their fists and said, "Then I'll leave it to you, brother." "Sorry to trouble you." Yu Qianqiu agreed to everything and kept rubbing his nose. His expression was wild with joy and his eyeballs were spinning around. He was just short of glowing green. Even the 4 women by his side felt a lot safer after he made such a ruckus. Gu Qingyun couldn't stand it anymore. He bowed to xuanhuan and said, "Grandmaster, is there really no way?" Before xuanhuan could speak, Yu Qianqiu turned and said, "Who said there is no way? How do you know it must be Ghost General? Which eye of yours saw it? The world is big and there are many capable people. Can't others sing here? So what if it's Ghost General? Who said he won't let us go?" He turned to xuanhuan and bowed. "Grandmaster Ko, I believe you must have not seen Ghost General with your own eyes. You also heard it from others, right?" The latter paused and nodded silently. Everyone was in an uproar. They all felt that Yu Qianqiu's words were reasonable. For a time hope was rekindled. Yu Qianqiu looked at the crowd with a smile, but he smiled bitterly in his heart. When people were desperate, they would grab a straw as a life-saving rope. His words were just to comfort himself and the others. It really couldn't stand up to scrutiny. How could a person who could scare off a pack of wolves with just 1 or 2 lines of singing in the demon ghost region be an ordinary person? He was probably the Ghost General that xuanhuan mentioned. Woo woo woo. A series of horns sounded. The crowd instantly quieted down and stared at the hillside in the distance. The black light was flashing above, and the blood-red evil spirit was entwined. Then came the sound of thousands of horses marching. The ground under their feet trembled faintly, and they could vaguely hear the neighing of war horses. Everyone's hearts beat faster in their chests. Yu Qianqiu secretly clicked his tongue. Oh my. They haven't seen the person, but the momentum is scary enough. Chapter 110. At the top of the mountain that everyone was leaning on, they could see the clear twinkling stars when they looked up. It was like a different world from the dark clouds that shrouded the mountainside. Elder Son of supporting Immortal Island suddenly pointed down and shouted, "Elder Dongfang, come look." The elders quickly rushed over, only to see the dark clouds churning mightily at the foot of the mountain, the red and black baleful aura lingering in it appearing and disappearing intermittently. The elders of the other great sects were also alarmed. Ignoring the differences between the righteous and demonic Tao, they all gathered around the people of supporting Immortal Island. Looking at the murderous aura that soared into the sky from time to time, everyone frowned. Dongfang Chang'eo stood with his hands behind his back and stared at the rolling dark clouds without blinking. After a while he said in a deep voice, "What kind of monster has such a strong qi? Is it the Ghost General?" Qiu Weiyuan of the 10,000 demons walked up to him slowly and said with a serious face, "Other than the Ghost King, who else has such a qi in this area?" The 4 leading elders of the Daluo sect, the Moon Clan, the Blood Demon Palace, and the Corpse sect also stood side by side with the 2 of them. Their expressions were unprecedentedly serious. "If it really is the Ghost General, I'm afraid none of these disciples will come back," the leading elder of the Daluo sect, Su Qingquan, said in a deep voice. At the moment, whether the disciples at the foot of the mountain were righteous or evil, they were all elites selected from the disciples of various sections. It would be a pity if they died like this. The leading elder of the Blood Demon Palace, Wen Zhongping, looked at the dark clouds and said, "Rumor has it that there are 10 ghost kings and 10 demon kings in this boundless demon territory. All of them have high cultivation. The Ghost General is one of them. It is said that he used to be a general who had great power over the army. After he was defeated and died, he made some achievements in cultivation. So, he gathered his subordinates who died with him and became the Ghost King of the demon territory. I think that's how the Ghost General got his name. I wonder if anyone has seen his real face?" The leading elder of the Moon clan, Huarui, nodded and said, "The ghost general of the demon ghost region was born at the wrong time. Even after death he is still full of regret. He sings and cries every night. Since someone spread this ballad, someone must have seen it before. It's just that we don't know." Everyone nodded silently. After a while, the 6 great system-allocated sects gathered their divine compass together. For some unknown reason, most of the glowing spots were gathered in the same spot, and a small number of them were scattered everywhere. Logically speaking, they should have been scattered, but based on the 6 divine compass, most of the disciples from the 6 great system-allocated sects were in the same spot. It was very strange. But for now it seemed that nothing had happened. Dongfang Chang'o sighed, "Let's wait and see." Everyone turned their attention to the foot of the mountain. The dark clouds were stirred up by the red and black evil qi, but the shock of thousands of soldiers marching suddenly disappeared without a trace. Yu Qianzhou and the other disciples looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Then they saw the foot of the mountain in front of them suddenly turn bright red, and they could see people in the light. Then there were a few neighs of war horses. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of hooves came and a horse rushed up the slope in front of them. A general in armor held the reins and circled the slope a few times. He looked at everyone from afar, and the red light behind him made him look even more majestic. Yu Qianzhou looked at Ko Xuanhuan, then at Gu Qingyun and said in shock, "This is the ghost general? Is he a ghost? No matter how I look at him, he looks like a living person." Unfortunately, no one answered his question. That person raised his leg and kicked the horse's belly, then galloped straight towards the group of people. His hooves moved quickly, and in a short while he pulled the reins and the horse appeared in front of everyone. Yu Qianzhou's mouth was wide open and he looked at him dumbfoundedly. The handsome horse was strong and the rider was burly. He had a sword on his waist, and he was dressed in a metallic shiny armor. His eyes were like that of a tiger and he looked back and forth at everyone, but he did not do anything that made them feel uneasy. The only difference between him and a normal person was that there seemed to be an indistinct black qi lingering around his body. "Are you really a ghost?" Yu Qianzhou pointed at him, then pointed at his horse and asked. The general's gaze paused on him, and it was obvious that he was a little surprised. He glanced at him coldly, but he did not say anything. When the disciples from the various sects heard his words, they instantly felt like they were about to go crazy. They really had to give it to him. Since when was he able to say anything? The handsome Gu Qingyun's face also twitched and he glared at him fiercely. In fact, he could not be blamed for this. In the world where his previous life came from, the understanding of ghosts was not like this. They were either ferocious mouths or green-faced fangs. In any case, they had to have a ferocious appearance, unlike this person who looked like a general on a galloping horse. On this point, there was a huge difference in understanding between him and the people behind him. The general's gaze moved away from the crowd, and slowly swept across the wilderness. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Since there are living people here and know that the great general is here, why are you not coming to kneel and pay your respects? What are you trying to do by hiding? You have an hour to pay your respects to the great general, or else you will be killed." His voice rolled and spread in all directions. "Go." As soon as he finished speaking, he galloped his horse and left, leaving the crowd in shock. "Grandmaster Ko, who is the great general he was talking about? Is it the ghost general you were talking about?" Yu Qianzhou turned his head and asked. Ko Xuanhua's face was pale and she nodded and said, "It should be him." "Tsk. Yu Qianzhou sighed and said, "This person died and became a ghost, but still became a general. How impressive." His words were full of envy. "Rumor has it that the ghost general was a great general who held great power in the army when he was alive," Ko Xuanhua said. "Oh, so that's how it is," Yu Qianzhou said as he took a few steps forward, and sheathed the sword in his hand. He patted his butt and turned to the crowd with a smile. "Let's go. Let's go see what the legendary ghost general looks like. This is not an opportunity that anyone can come across. Alright, everyone, put away the weapons in your hands. Didn't you hear that he asked us to pay our respects? Since we can't beat him, why are we still holding weapons in our hands? Isn't that asking for death?" The crowd put away their weapons in fear. Gu Qingyun peeked at Yu Qianzhou from time to time and he really admired him now. Even though he knew that he was going to die, he could still be so calm, and he admitted that he would not be able to do that. Yu Qianzhou walked in front with big, swaying steps, and the crowd followed a few feet behind him. He only stopped when he reached the edge of the slope, and the light from the fire hit his face and he was truly shocked. At the bottom of the slope was an open plain, and the army camp that was even more magnificent than those in the movies was displayed in front of him. He estimated that there were at least tens of thousands of people. No wonder he was called the Ghost General. Magnificent. Xianxia was excited, and his gaze fell on the wooden platform in the middle of the army camp. He paused for a moment, then ran down the slope and walked quickly towards the army camp. The disciples of the various sects were stunned on the slope for a while, and when they saw that Xianxia was almost at the edge of the army camp, xuanhuan jumped down to follow him, and a large group of people had no choice but to jump down and follow him. Outside the army camp, surrounded by wooden fences, there were two groups of soldiers standing guard in front of the main gate. Xianxia looked at them and realized that these people looked a little like ghosts. Their faces were ashen and their expressions were dull. Just as he was about to step into the camp, two ghost soldiers with spears stopped him, and stared at him with their mouths open. Chirp chirp. For a while. Is this how the ghost story is? Xianxia was stunned, so these ghosts did not know how to speak human language, and it seemed that their cultivation was not good enough. He immediately pointed at the people behind him and smiled. We are here to pay our respects to the great general. Please inform him of our arrival. At this moment, an officer walked out of the barracks, and it was the one who rode the horse just now. He only heard him shout, "Let them in." The ghost soldiers immediately retreated to the side and gave way. Chapter 111. As soon as the officer finished shouting, many ghost soldiers rushed out of the barracks, starting from the main gate of the barracks. They held torches in one hand and spears in the other, standing in two rows, leaving a path hundreds of meters long, all the way to the wooden platform in the center. The barracks of tens of thousands of soldiers and horses instantly became so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. It was a scene of strict military discipline. Dang dang dang. The sound of pipa came from the direction of the wooden platform. There was a murderous intent hidden in it, but it was obvious, as if it was an ambush from 10 sides. Xianxia, who was smiling, became gloomy and narrowed his eyes. Are you trying to show off your military might to me? He had been a soldier in his previous life and had seen such a scene. Those who were timid would tremble on the spot, and they could not even walk properly. This was the power of the military. A faintly discernible aura burst forth from Xianxia's body. The feeling he gave off suddenly changed, as if he had become a completely different person. The officer standing in front of him could not help but look at him a few more times. Many of the disciples outside the Yuan gate began to breathe heavily. They could hear it clearly. Xianxia glanced at the officer coldly, as if he was looking at an ant, and the officer's body slightly stiffened. He slowly turned back to stare at the crowd and said indifferently, "Useless things, a group of living people can't be scared by a group of ghosts. With this kind of courage, how are you going to follow me in the future?" After saying that, he turned around without looking at them. In normal times, if he dared to say such words, there would definitely be many people who would fight him to the death. There were many people with higher cultivation than him, but at this moment, no one dared to make a sound. Xuanhuan could not tell what the officer's expression was, but a trace of shame appeared on his face. The veins on the officer's neck bulged and his face showed anger, but he calmed down after a deep breath. He looked at Xianxia seriously and was slightly surprised. As a ghost king in the early stage, which was equivalent to the early stage of the human tribulation, he could not see through Xianxia's cultivation. But this person looked so young, and one really could not judge a book by its cover. At this moment, he became cautious and raised his hand to lead the way, saying, "Please." His attitude was completely different from before. Damn it. Face was earned by oneself. Xianxia placed his hands behind his back and glanced at him coldly. Then he looked straight ahead and replied with an indifferent, Then he strode forward. The ghost soldiers standing on both sides with their spears were nothing to him. The disciples of the various sects were a few meters away from him, following him step by step. For some people, the military formation of a few hundred meters long was a welcoming display of honor, but for others, it was an increasingly oppressive feeling. Xianxia treated it as the former. He slowly walked forward, his expression not changing at all. However, the footsteps of the various sects' disciples behind him became more and more chaotic. When he was about 50 meters away from the central platform, Xianxia noticed that the people standing on both sides of the platform had changed from ghost soldiers to armored officers. He glanced at them for a while and then looked away. His eyes fell on the platform in front of him, where a burly man was sitting. The further he walked, the clearer he could see. He was burly, his hair was tied up, and his eyebrows were slanted to his temples. His eyes were large and full of spirit, and his gaze was like a torch. He had a prominent nose and thick lips and a short beard. He was dressed in golden armor and his scarlet cloak fell to his shoulders. There was a long table in front of him, and a golden beast helmet was placed on one end of it. There were also many fruit plates placed on top of it. The burly man picked up a slightly transparent purple wine cup and poured the liquid down his throat with his head tilted up. A maidservant beside him plucked a grape from the table and gently placed it in his mouth. The burly man chewed on the grape and glanced at Xianxia and the others who were walking over. Then, his eyes fell on a stunning woman in a plain robe who was playing the pipa. His every move showed the demeanor of a general of the military. If one did not know that he was the Ghost King, who would be able to tell that he was here? Xianxia led the group to the front of the stage and stopped. He glanced at the woman playing the pipa and secretly praised her. She was iron-blooded and gentle. What a great general. Xianxia's eyes were full of admiration for another man. He glanced at the stage, smiled and said slowly, "Grape wine in a luminous cup, and when one wants to drink, the pipa is urged immediately. Drunk on the battlefield, how many people have returned from war since ancient times? Great general, you are drinking and having fun in this military camp. What a refined mood. I, cultivator Xianxia, have long heard of the great general's name. I have specially come to pay my respects to the great general." As he said that, he cupped his hands in greeting. Suddenly, a general at the side took a step forward, pointed his finger and shouted, "How dare you? Where did this arrogant fellow come from? How dare you not kneel in front of the great general?" This fellow's voice was loud as well. He did not use any cultivation, but his shout could be heard by everyone present. It scared some of the timid disciples from the various sections. Their legs turned to jelly and they almost knelt down. Xianxia was unmoved. He glanced at him and sneered in his heart. It seemed like all the generals who looked like Zhang Fei had such a fiery temper. He did not want to lower himself to his level. He looked at Ghost General who was on the stage. The general was so angry that he kept shouting. He strode over and was about to make a move. On the stage, Ghost King suddenly shouted without looking at him, "Stand down." He then waved his hand at the pipa girl and the sound of the pipa stopped. The general was stunned for a moment when he looked at the stage, but he still obediently retreated. The sound of golden armor rubbing against each other was heard. Ghost General stood up from his seat. The braziers on both sides shone brightly on his golden armor, making him look even more extraordinary. He first stared deeply at Xianxia for a while. Seeing that Xianxia was smiling at him without fear, he returned a smile. He then played with the purple wine cup in his hand and said slowly in a deep voice, "Grape wine in the luminous cup, if you want to drink, the pipa urges you immediately. Drunk on the battlefield, Lord Grim. Since ancient times, how many people have returned from war? Since ancient times, how many people have returned from war?" He repeated the last sentence for a long time. No one knew what he was thinking. Some of the generals on both sides also recited softly, "Since ancient times, how many people have returned from war?" Although their voices were very soft, it was not difficult to understand the bleakness in their tone. Gu Qingyun stood behind Qin Wentian. His eyes were wide open as he surveyed Qin Wentian from head to toe, as though he didn't recognize him. Shock filled his heart. Is this still the swindling hoodlum I met in the cultivation pavilion? How could he spontaneously compose such a poem based on the situation? If he was pretending to be calm at the beginning, how could he improvise such a poem in front of the famous ghost general of the demon ghost region without this calmness? There were also people with taste among the disciples of various sects, especially the female disciples of the Moon Clan. Women naturally liked beautiful things and poems were the same, especially poems with a profound artistic conception. The group of women shook their heads and tried to look through the crowd, wanting to get to know Xianxia again. Unfortunately, a certain someone left them with an unmoving back. For a moment, the fear in everyone's hearts was actually reduced to the lowest point. Suddenly, the ghost general came back to his senses. He raised the wine cup in his hand and looked at Xianxia with a smile. "Young sir, you are indeed talented. Your impromptu work can be called a masterpiece. You are a rare talent. Then may I trouble you to comment on the pipa song that my maid played just now? This song was composed by me personally. Young sir, please comment on whether it can be considered a masterpiece. Damn it. I'm not AF * King talent. What the hell do I know about pipa songs? But this song is like Ambush from 10 Sides that I heard in my previous life. Whatever, I will comment on it. After all, I am an expert who learned to play the pipa from my sister." Xianxia pretended to think for a moment and nodded. He said straightforwardly, This song can be considered a masterpiece among the Pipa songs, but it has a very bad meaning for the general. In an instant, the generals on both sides and the disciples behind him all focused their eyes on him. "Oh," the ghost general replied. He turned to the side with his hands behind his back and no longer looked at him. He said in a deep voice, "How is it ominous? Young sir, please tell me." There was a hint of coldness in his words. Chapter 112. He recalled the song Ambush from 10 Sides from his previous life. It seemed to be about the war between Chu and Han. The king of Chu, Xianxia, was besieged by the king of Han, Liu Bang, and was surrounded by enemies from all directions. The last of the heroes, the hegemon king of western Chu, Xianxia, ended up committing suicide at the Wu River. He thought to himself, "I'm probably not mistaken." Yu Qianzhou stared at the figure on the stage and said slowly, "Overflowing with murderous intent, surrounded by enemies from all directions, ambushed from 10 sides, no way to live, no way to retreat, and the song ends with death." As soon as he said that, there was a sudden clap on the stage. The pipa in the pipa girl's hand fell onto the stage. The generals on both sides could not help but sway, their expressions changing unpredictably. Ghost General's hand that was playing with the wine glass also paused. When the disciples from the various sects saw that Yu Qianzhou's words had caused such a huge reaction, they did not know what would happen to them, so they held their breaths and watched anxiously. Yu Qianzhou, on the other hand, smiled inwardly. He reckoned that the person on the stage was as unlucky as Xianxia. His guess was right. This song was written by Ghost General when he was surrounded in the last battle before his death. In the end, after the maidservant played the song once, the enemy launched a large-scale attack, and all the generals present were the souls of the dead. Just like that, Yu Qianzhou's words evoked the tragic memories of their defeat. How could they not be moved? Ghost General walked up to the maidservant, bent down to pick up the pipa, and returned it to her with a sigh. The maidservant held the pipa, looked at him gently, and shook her head. Yu Qianzhou saw the two of them exchanging flirtatious glances. The latter thought to himself, "What a *T maidservant, I think she's more like a concubine." He then looked at the maid beside the general's seat. Only then did she look like a maid. The red-armored ghost general took a few steps back and glanced at the absent-minded people. He frowned slightly and stared at Yu Qianzhou, shouting in a deep voice, "I don't care if you're really talented or not. But you've spoken rudely and disturbed the morale of my troops. You'll be beheaded according to the military law." It seemed that Yu Qianzhou's words really touched his sore spot. The disciples of the various sects started to panic. After killing Yu Qianzhou they would be next. *CKME. Behead your mother. You've long since become a ghost. Military law my ass. Yu Qianzhou was stunned for a moment, then he sneered and said, "The great general is in control of the military, killing me is naturally not a problem. But does the great general still remember? You're the one who wants me to judge the song. After that, he criticized me for disturbing the morale of the army." Could it be that the great general was a fickle villain? The great general is famous in the demon domain. I didn't expect. He shook his head and said, "You've really disappointed me." After that, he thought to himself, "It seems like I have to get ready to leave." His rebuke made the disciples of the various sects even more flustered. On the other hand, the generals on both sides, including the hot-tempered one, all stared at the Ghost King on the stage. Ghost General swept his gaze to both sides and snorted coldly. He said, "What a glib tongue. You're Yu Qianzhou, right? Yu Qianzhou, I want to see if you can Yu Qianzhou. Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. If you can restore the morale of my troops and restore the morale of my troops, I'll let you go." Everyone could see that Ghost General's words were undoubtedly making things difficult for him. Instantly, all eyes fell on Yu Qianzhou. *CK. Yu Qianzhou's gaze paused on the maidservant holding the pipa on the stage and the zither on the shelf behind her. He smiled and said, "How would I dare to disobey the order of the great general? However, I have a small request. I wonder if the great general can agree to it?" Ghost General snorted coldly. "Speak." "I want to borrow something from the great general's roll-calling platform," Yu Qianzhou said bluntly. "I don't care if you're Ghost General or not. Anyway, I'm not afraid of you." Everyone didn't know what he wanted to do and looked curiously at the roll-calling platform. Even the Ghost King turned around and glanced behind him. He didn't find anything special and couldn't help but sneer. "You have to use everything on the platform. However, if you don't meet my requirements after using it, don't blame me for punishing you according to military law." Actually, he was a little curious about Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that the Ghost King agreed, Xianxia didn't say anything and climbed up the side of the roll-calling platform indifferently. Standing on the platform, he looked around. It felt good to have thousands of soldiers and horses right under his nose. Everyone's gaze followed him. Xianxia paused on the platform. He looked at the long table filled with fruits and wine and said to the maidservant in front of the great general's throne, "Clean up everything on this long table." The maidservant was startled and looked at the Ghost King. The latter's eyes flashed with a trace of doubt. He frowned and said, "Do as he says." The maidservant immediately obeyed and quickly cleaned up the long table. Then she stood to the side. Everyone's appetite was really whetted. Xianxia nodded in satisfaction. He then walked over to the maidservant holding the pipa and stood in front of her. He smiled and looked at her. She was indeed a beauty that could cause the downfall of nations. No wonder she was always by the great general's side. The maidservant was also looking at Xianxia curiously. She had never seen such a bold person. The disciples from the various sects were shocked. Xianxia looked like he was flirting with an innocent woman. No, he was flirting with the Ghost General's maidservant in public. He was too bold. Did this brat not want to live anymore? The generals on both sides of the platform looked at each other. They had followed the Ghost General from birth to death. Naturally, they knew the identity of this woman. The Ghost General's expression darkened. Xianxia suddenly shook his head and sighed. "Only the great general's elegance is worthy of your peerless beauty." Having been seen through by him, the maid smiled sweetly and bowed slightly, implicitly expressing her gratitude for his compliment. This flattery that was neither light nor heavy actually made the Ghost General feel comfortable. His brows unconsciously twitched, and his sunken expression returned to normal. He continued to watch patiently. Xianxia walked to the shelf behind her and took down a zither. He waved his finger on the strings to make a harmonic note. He tested the tone and found it to be not bad. He then walked to her side and asked, "Do you know how to play the zither?" The maidservant looked at the Ghost General and smiled at him. She turned back and said, "I know a thing or two." Xianxia hugged the zither and smiled. "Just now the great general allowed me to listen to your song on the pipa. In the end, my evaluation angered the great general. Now that I have come across a piece of music, I have specially come to repay Mississippi. I respectfully ask Miss to listen. I hope that Mrs. Evaluation will be able to appease the great general's anger. I will be eternally grateful." Flattery must be done on the blade. Since the Ghost King had the same character as Xianghu, this girl must be similar to Yuji. Pillow talk must be very powerful. Xianxia thought so. Although Xianxia spoke politely, the maidservant did not see any fear in him. The maidservant glanced at the Ghost General and said with a smile, "I can listen to the song, but I have never asked about the great general's military affairs." These words were smart. She was a smart woman. No wonder the Ghost King liked her. Xianxia smiled. He walked to the long table and put down the zither. He then sat down and made a "please sit opposite me" gesture to the maidservant. The maidservant smiled sweetly. She did not care about the disgrace of sitting on the ground. She placed the pipa on the shelf behind her and took down a praying mat. She walked over gracefully. The maidservant beside the great general hurried over and took the praying mat from the maidservant. She placed it opposite Xianxia. The pipa maidservant also sat opposite him seductively. Xianxia glanced at the Ghost General and saw that he was looking at the pipa maidservant with infinite love. He thought to himself that this woman was his Achilles' heel. The generals below the stage were dumbfounded. The disciples of the various sects were also dumbfounded. The female disciples looked at Xianxia with admiration. Gu Qingyun's chest rose and fell rapidly. He was thrilled. "What a hero! I am ashamed. I, Gu Qingyun, am not even 1/10,000th as good." Chapter 113. At the peak of the mountain, the elders of the 6 major sects were relieved to see the dark clouds calming down. Suddenly an elder shouted, "Look, it's moving." The elders gathered together and saw that the light dots on the 6 divine sense compasses, other than the scattered ones, had all gathered together and seemed to be moving in the same direction. The elders watched calmly, but after a while the dot of light stopped moving again. What's going on? The elders found it strange. They were also people who had trained in the devil domain, so they knew that the scattered light spots were probably those experienced people who had already laid in ambush. But what was going on with so many people gathered together? They had never seen it before. Could it be that they were all captured by the Ghost General? Zhou Wuyuan asked doubtfully. Everyone was silent. They all had this guess and their hearts were heavy. Logically speaking, when this kind of situation occurred, they, the elders, should have taken action to help. But could they save them from the hands of the Ghost General? Not only did he have the cultivation of the Ghost King, but he also had many Ghost King cultivators under him. If they, who were at the crossing calamity stage, went to the Ghost General, they might not be able to return. Hey! An elder of supporting Immortals Island pointed to a moving light spot on the spiritual compass in front of him, and everyone gathered to look. Elder Quan and Elder Sun glanced at each other. They were very familiar with this light spot of divine sense. It was Xianxia's. Even Xianxia didn't move, so why did this kid move alone? Xianxia closed his eyes and prepared for a while. When he opened his eyes, he smiled at the beauty in front of him. His fingers flew on the strings, and the prelude was like floating clouds and flowing water. It was a tune that no one had heard before. The maid's eyes lit up and she listened attentively. Since the Ghost General could play the pipa, he naturally knew about this. He looked at Xianxia with a trace of surprise. The three female disciples of Xuanhuan Garden who knew Xianxia didn't know that he could play the pipa. They only knew that he had a good relationship with the elder in charge and often came to Xuanhuan Garden to eat and drink. Everyone gradually became immersed in the sound of the zither. Xianxia suddenly started singing. His voice was not perfect and his singing was a little hoarse, but it had a leisurely charm. Endless extravagant love in the world of mortals, endless grievances in the world of mortals, generations are all fated, the same blood flows, the same water drinks, this road is long and long. Of course the red flowers would accompany the green leaves, but who would accompany them for the rest of their lives? Faintly coming and going, the scenes of the past reappear in my mind. Although the lotus root is broken, the thread is still connected. I sigh at the many changes in the world. A red flower must be matched with green leaves. Who would accompany her in this life? The Ghost General and the maid were moved. The two of them couldn't restrain their emotions. Their eyes were filled with tenderness. The female disciples below the stage were in a trance. Their eyes shone with a hint of amorous desire. As for the generals and male disciples, they only felt that the song was pleasant to listen to, and the lyrics were filled with the vicissitudes of life. They were all deeply immersed in it. Suddenly, the sound of the zither became more impassioned. Xianxia stared at the Ghost General and sang, "Love the country, love the beauty more." Which hero would rather be alone? A good man is full of courage. His name is known far and wide. How many autumns do we have in life? I won't stop until I'm drunk. My beauty in the east. The yellow river flows in the west. Come give me a drink. I won't stop until I'm drunk. Don't put your worries and troubles in your heart. When the second half of the song was sung, the Ghost General's eyes moved away from the maid and stared at the Xianxia. The muscles on his face kept twitching and he seemed to be very excited. The men below the stage were all infected by the lyrics of the song. The chests of all the generals were heaving up and down, and their eyes were red. They must have been soldiers who had fought in the east and the west, so they could better understand the phrase, "Good men are full of courage and have lofty aspirations and are famous throughout the world." The generals clenched their teeth and their bodies trembled. Although they had died long ago, this feeling could be remembered. They did not give up their bodies in vain. They died in battle and their souls did not return. If you don't believe me, today I have a song to prove it. A good man is full of courage. His name is known far and wide. Xianxia played and sang again and again. In the end, he was influenced by the crowd and unknowingly activated his true vitality. The sound of the zither became louder and the song became stronger. After a few times, his fingers played a homophonic tune. When the song ended, the echo lingered for a long time. It was not until Xianxia sat for a while and stood up that the crowd realized that the song had ended. A general below the stage suddenly punched his chest and raised his fist, shouting, "Great General!" In an instant the crowd was affected. Other than the disciples of the various sects, everyone raised their fists and shouted, "Great General! Great General!" Their emotions were boiling and their voices shook the field. Killing intent spread from the crowd and gathered in the air. The disciples of the various sects were dumbfounded. Ghost General faced the crowd and tried his best to calm his chest. He raised his palms and pressed down forcefully. Only then did the soldiers stop. He turned around again and looked at Xianxia. He gritted his teeth and said, "Great General, you flatter me. I wonder how the morale has been restored to the Great General?" Xianxia cupped his fists and smiled. "Is the Great General satisfied?" "Ha." Ghost General laughed into the sky. He suddenly waved his hand and said, "Such a great song. Does it have a name?" Yu Qianzhou decided to flatter him to the end. He smiled and said, "This song was composed on the spot. I haven't given it a name yet. Since the great general wants it, I will give it to the great general." As he said that, he looked around and his gaze fell on a huge flagpole below the stage. He made a hand seal and 3 cold rays shot out. After a series of dazzling carvings on the flagpole, he retracted his fingers and clenched his fists. The 3 cold rays quickly returned to their positions. The crowd followed Ghost General's gaze and saw a few big words appear on the flagpole. Ghost General repeated, "Love the country more than the beauty, love the country more than the beauty." He then laughed and said, "Love the country more than the beauty, Mr. Yu is a great talent." Yu Qianzhou was just about to say a few polite words when he saw Mr. Yu make a gesture toward the people below. Suddenly all the officers and soldiers below shouted, "Mr. Yu is really a great talent. Mr. Yu is a great talent." After shouting twice, Ghost General waved his hand to stop them. Cough cough. Yu Qianzhou clenched his fists and pretended to cough. His face actually turned red, which was rare. Ghost General pulled the maidservant beside him and held her hand. He said gently, "Of course the red flowers are matched with the green leaves. Who will accompany me for the rest of my life? My beauty in the east and the west." He suddenly turned his head and asked, "Mr. Yu, the song says that the Yellow River flows in the west. Where is the Yellow River? I have traveled all over the world. Why haven't I heard of it? Please enlighten me." Cough cough. Yu Qianzhou coughed again. "Damn it. I forgot to sing and change the lyrics. Why did I bring the Yellow River from my previous life here? Where am I supposed to find the Yellow River now?" So this was how the idiom "speak without thinking" came about. Damn it. However, this kind of question was not difficult for him. Naturally, he could give an answer that could fool him. Yu Qianzhou's expression suddenly became serious. He said, "Although the world is bright, the ways of the world are deteriorating and people's hearts are not what they used to be. I don't know which river can be described as clear. Since I feel that it is muddy, how about I call it the Yellow River?" Chapter 114. When Ghost General heard this, his face was full of surprise. The maid beside him bowed and said, "I didn't expect Mr. Yu to not only be a talented cultivator, but also a person who cares for the common people. Yuji admires you." "Madam, please don't be like this. Yu Qianzhou doesn't deserve such praise." Yu Qianzhou returned the gesture very modestly. Suddenly, his expression changed and he asked, "Madam, what did you say your name was?" The maid looked at Ghost General and said with a smile, "I am Yu Ji. Has Mr. heard of my name before?" Yu Qianzhou's face twitched. He looked at Ghost General and said, "Could it be that the general is called Xianghu?" "Xianghu?" Ghost General was startled and said, "Who is Xianghu? I have never changed my name or surname. I am Meng Yan." Yu Qianzhou heaved a sigh of relief. He quickly bowed and apologized, "I was babbling nonsense. General and Madam, please don't take it to heart." But in his heart he muttered, "I must set a rule for my descendants to not marry a woman named Yu Ji. In my past life there was a Xiangyu who died young. In this life there is a Meng Yan. It seems that women named Yu Ji are fated to bring bad luck to their husbands. Mr. Yu, you don't have to be so polite. I think you misremembered my name." Ghost General, who was a head taller than Yu Qianzhou, reached out his hand to support him. He glanced at the long table where the fruit platters were removed and said, "Mr. Would you like to accompany me to the main tent for a drink?" Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "I dare not." Ghost General laughed and led Yu Ji down from the stage. They walked towards a large tent not far away. Yu Qianzhou nodded in the direction of the various sect's disciples, signaling them not to worry. Then he followed the two of them. The disciples of the various sects were now prostrating themselves in admiration towards him. In just a short while after messing around, they had become Ghost General's honored guests. Their lives should be safe now. Many people suddenly remembered what they had said to Yu Qianzhou before. As long as they could leave the demon domain alive, they would give themselves to him. However, they only thought about it and did not take it to heart. Everyone knew that it was just a joke. They believed that Yu Qianzhou would not take it to heart. Everyone naturally thought so. Wine and food were all available in the tent. The host and guests sat in turn and toasted each other. After a few glasses of wine, Ghost General Meng Yan suddenly asked, "Which sect does Mr. Yu cultivate in?" Yu Qianzhou replied, "Fuxian Island." As soon as he said this, he noticed that Meng Yan's expression was a little ugly. The atmosphere in the tent suddenly became a little strange. Yu Ji, who was beside him, pulled him and called out softly, "General." Meng Yan drank by himself and looked straight ahead. In the outside world, the people with the surname Li are still ruling. Yu Ji, who was beside him, smiled apologetically at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded, indicating that it was okay. However, his mind turned a few times and he already had some speculations in his heart. He said indifferently, "The imperial family of the Wuxia Empire is indeed surnamed Li. I just don't know if it is the family with the surname Li that General mentioned." Meng Yan snorted and said, "It seems that Fuxian Island is the top of the cultivation world now. As long as Fuxian Island doesn't collapse, it will be very difficult for the country of China to change its surname. As a disciple of Fuxian Island, how can you not know? In this era, no matter how strong a country's military strength was, it was impossible for them to compete with the cultivation world. They were not on the same level. It was impossible for a royal family to sit on the throne steadily without a strong cultivation sect as a backer." Yu Qianqiu already knew this, but he didn't expect that the backing of the Chinese imperial family was actually Fuxian Island. From what Meng Yan said, he could tell that this was something that he had never thought of. However, it made sense. In the cultivation world, other than Fuxian Island, which sect had the strength to support the family with the surname Li for thousands of years? It seemed that the rise of the family with the surname Li was around the same time as the rise of Fuxian Island. It was something that happened thousands of years ago. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, "I'm just a foundation establishment disciple of Fuxian Island. General might be right, but I really don't know." "You're still at the foundation establishment realm?" Meng Yan and Yu Ji were stunned at the same time and looked at each other. The two of them had already observed Yu Qianqiu and discovered that they couldn't see through his cultivation. In addition, he didn't seem to be afraid of anything and didn't care about anything. This gave the two of them an unfathomable feeling. After all, he looked too young. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. It was hard to prove this. He suddenly smiled meaningfully and said, "I'm also a disciple of An Kuangtsung." The couple looked at each other again. Meng Yan smiled with great interest and said, "What kind of sect is An Kuangtsung? I've never heard of it. Since when can a person join two sects at the same time in the cultivation world? It was a taboo in the cultivation world in the past." Yu Qianqiu raised his wine glass and took a sip. He said indifferently, "Fuxian Island is ranked first among the righteous sects in the cultivation world, and An Kuangtsung is ranked 6th. As for joining two sects at the same time, it's also a taboo nowadays." "Since it's a taboo, why did you tell me? Aren't you afraid that it'll be spread out?" Meng Yan looked indifferent, but he subconsciously straightened his body. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said indifferently, "Because I want to ask General for a small favor, so I treat you with sincerity." "Small favor?" Meng Yan looked at Yu Ji. The latter saw that they were talking about such a topic, so she raised her wine glass to her mouth and sipped it. She pretended that she didn't see anything, as if she wasn't interested in expressing her opinion on such a matter. Meng Yan snorted and said, "I'm not related to you, so why should I help you? Because I think, if the Wuxia Empire were to be ruled by a different surname, General, I'm sure you'd be very happy to see it." Yu Qianqiu plucked a grape from the table and easily popped it into his mouth. "What a joke. If I wanted to be ruled by someone else, I don't need you to remind me. My hundreds of thousands of troops can change the face of the Wuxia Empire at any time. Even if your Fuxian Island and An Kuangtsung join forces, you won't be able to stop them." Meng Yan said disdainfully, "Is that so?" Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I'm afraid it's not that General doesn't want to do it, but there's a reason you can't do it. For example, the hundreds of thousands of troops can't even leave the monster region, or there's some other reason. I don't know about that." Arrogant. Meng Yan was like a lion that was hit in its sore spot. He stood up abruptly and looked like he was going to make a move. Yu Ji, who was at the side, pretended not to see anything and continued to sip the wine in her cup. "What? You want to make a move? Since I dared to come, I'm not afraid of you." Yu Qianqiu let out a cold snort. Instantly, a peerless beauty in a white dress appeared beside him. Her peerless face was as cold as ice as she slowly turned her head and stared at Meng Yan and Yu Ji. Teleportation. The two of them were shocked. When did the other party bring someone in? They didn't even know. Moreover, it was such a beautiful woman. She was so beautiful that even Yu Ji felt she couldn't compare. Suddenly, a powerful aura appeared from the other party's body and pressed towards the two of them. Meng Yan took a step forward and blocked in front of Yu Ji. A black and red baleful aura instantly came out of his body and blocked the aura. However, he was still forced to take a step back. Chapter 115. Sister, don't do it. Yu Qianqiu tried to persuade her casually. Bai Suzhen rolled up her sleeves and waved her hand to withdraw her threatening aura. She stood there quietly and watched coldly, as if the soul-stirring scene just now had nothing to do with her. Meng Yan's evil qi was gone, and his aura soared instantly. He took a step forward and his bones crackled. He laughed wickedly and said, "When did the demon clan have a demon at the final stage of the nature's test? Very good. The 10 great demon kings and the ghost king have made an agreement that the demon dominates the yang and the ghost dominates the yin in their respective territories. Now that the demon clan has broken the rules, don't blame me for being impolite. You are a frog at the bottom of a well. Do you think that only the demon clan has a demon at the final stage of the nature's test?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and turned back to Bai Suzhen with a smile. "Sister, why are you here? Where are Yunchang and the others?" Bai Suzhen understood what he meant. Before Yu Qianqiu summoned her, he had secretly contacted her with his divine sense. He wanted her to give the ghost general a show of strength after she came out. Therefore, when she came out just now, she used all her cultivation to force the ghost king to take a step back with her aura. As soon as the frosty face turned around, it instantly turned into a touch of gentleness. He cooperated with her and said with a trace of anger, "Am I not as good as them in your eyes?" This was a good answer. It not only protected her bad habit of lying, but also cooperated with her brother. Anyone with a little brain would figure out what kind of people Yunchang and the others were. In Yu Qianqiu's mind, they were actually better than Bai Suzhen, who was at the final stage of the nature's test. Yu Qianqiu smiled sheepishly. Big sister must be joking. Yunchang and the others dare not say that they are better than big sister. They are just afraid of troubling big sister. Sure enough, the husband and wife were secretly surprised by their conversation. However, the ghost general had suffered a loss, so he couldn't let go of his pride so easily. He immediately said in a deep voice, "I used to roam the world, but today I've become a frog at the bottom of a well. However, since you're here, I can't help but want to learn from you." For a moment, his eyes actually emitted a red glow of excitement, showing that the fighting spirit in his heart had been ignited. He had missed out on the soldiers' thirst for battle. Yu Qianqiu groaned inwardly. Could it be that he had misjudged Yu Ji? If they fought, they would really be exposed. Although the evil Taoist was the strongest among those of the same cultivation level, it would alert the Ghost King's subordinates outside. His Yun Chang and the others would be useless now. Besides, Yu Ji was not someone to be trifled with. It seemed that he had to be prepared to leave. All his efforts were in vain. Bai Suzhen slowly turned her head. Her face was still as calm as before. A faintly discernible white aura spread out, forcing Yu Qianqiu to take a few steps back. At this moment he suddenly heard Yu Ji shout, "General, stop." Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. She was indeed a woman who was unwilling to be left alone. From the attitude that Meng Yan unintentionally revealed to her, it could be seen that Meng Yan's defeat in his lifetime was more or less related to this woman. A general who would not let go of a woman on the battlefield, and a woman who could always influence his decisions, no matter how powerful the general was, it would be difficult for him to always win. However, she was just right for him to use. "You're a guest. How can a general treat a guest like this?" Yu Ji stood up and held Meng Yan's arm. The latter's murderous aura immediately fell into a gentle embrace and disappeared without a trace. This woman had grasped the essence of playing the hero and the villain. Yu Qianqiu smiled knowingly. He also walked to Bai Suzhen's side and held her hand gently. Looking at her familiar face, which had risked her life for him and was envied by the world, he could not say anything more. He said softly, "Sister, please go back." The white gas disappeared and became gentle again. Everything was said without words. Bai Suzhen nodded slightly and disappeared without a trace. Yu Qianqiu took a breath and turned around. Meng Yan and Yu Ji were shocked again. They looked at each other. If it was said that they did not notice Bai Suzhen's sudden appearance at the beginning, it would be understandable if the two of them were careless. Now that the two of them were paying attention to her, even if it was teleportation, they should be able to roughly estimate where she was going, but Meng Yan suddenly felt that he was a little too reckless just now. This woman's cultivation base at the end of the tribulation was much stronger than his. If he were to make a move, he might really be killed in an instant. He couldn't help but look at Yu Ji again, rejoicing that her words were timely. Of course, the two of them did not know that there was such a thing as a golden bead in the world. "Mr. Yu, is this lady really your sister? I think they look like a couple." Yu Ji covered her mouth and giggled as if nothing had happened just now. This woman really knew how to liven up the atmosphere. With her appearance and mind, she would be an outstanding social butterfly in his previous life. Xianxia waved his hand and smiled faintly without explaining. So what if he called his sister a couple? He called her master and aunt, but in the end, didn't he still become her husband? I'm far worse than that one-armed hero. Heroicjourney is a generation apart. This is the gap. Meng Yan was an ambitious and ruthless man, but he wasn't someone who couldn't let go. Moreover, his woman had pretty much resolved the awkward atmosphere, so he bluntly said, Mr. Yu's sister's cultivation is higher than mine, but I wonder who she is? I'm afraid that not many people will know. Xianxia leisurely said, she comes from a place called Utopia. Unfortunately, they are a group of people who don't like to get involved in the mortal world, otherwise. He shook his head and said, if there's a chance, I would like to take you and your wife there. Oh, I'm looking forward to it. Yuji giggled. It's a piece of cake. Xianxia waved his hand and said, since we've already said it, Xianxia will not hide it anymore. Let's start with a villain first, then a gentleman. As I said, please help me with a small matter. Say it. As long as it's something that I can help with, just say the word. Ghost General also waved his hand generously. Xianxia smiled and said, this is a piece of cake for you, General. Wait. Yuji suddenly stopped him and said to Meng Yan with a smile, since Mr. Yu said to start with a villain first, then a gentleman, I'm not a gentleman, I'm a woman. Can General let me be a villain again? Meng Yan frowned in confusion and looked at Xianxia with an apologetic smile. He turned back and said, Madam, please speak. I also want to ask Mr. Yu for a favor. Yuji smiled brightly. This woman is really hard to deal with. Xianxia was startled and nodded. What is it? Madam, please speak. As long as it's within my means, I won't hesitate. Yuji smiled. It's something that Mr. has promised. Xianxia suddenly realized, is it about changing surnames and ruling the world? Does Madam have someone in mind? Why don't you tell me? He thought to himself that it's a pity. In his mind, the pillar of General Shi family is the best candidate for his plan. They have a large business, high influence and military power, saving him a lot of effort. It seems like his plan will be ruined by this bitch. Unexpectedly, Yuji shook her head and said, no. I believe Mr. has already guessed that my general has a grudge against the Li family. However, the winner is king and the loser is a bandit. No one can say anything and can only say that this is our fate. No matter how unstable the general's heart is, it's already been thousands of years. At least to me it's already been forgotten. The small favor I want Mr. to help me with is another matter. Does Mr. still keep his promise to bring us to Utopia? Xianxia was stunned and said, that's it? He had to admit that this was indeed a small favor for him. It was too easy and he could do it now. Furthermore, as long as he was willing, he could guarantee that the two of them could stay in Utopia for the rest of their lives. That's it. Yuji nodded with a smile. Xianxia glanced at Meng Yan and realized that he was actually unable to control his excitement. His chest was heaving up and down rapidly. Damn it. This woman's words aren't that simple. I wonder what she's up to. After thinking about it, he really couldn't think of anything wrong. He could only nod and say, I'll agree. Yuji glanced at Meng Yan and turned around to walk over. She chuckled and said, Mister, don't agree too quickly. I'm afraid there's something you don't know yet. It won't be too late to agree after I finish speaking. Otherwise, Mr. will definitely blame Yuji later. I won't be able to face that. Chapter 116. Damn it. This is a real plot. I can't avoid it. Xianxia really wanted to sell her to Africa to be a chicken. It was not a good feeling for a man to be dug a pit by a woman and asked to jump into it. Moreover, it was a female ghost. It was hard for him not to jump into it. Xianxia said with a smile, Madam, tell me. Yuji bowed to Meng Yan, who nodded. Xianxia was confused. Yuji showed a rare solemn expression and asked, how much do you know about the demon ghost region? Xianxia paused and said, I don't know much. I've only heard about it from others. This is the first time I've heard about the great general. It seems like others don't know much about this place either. It's really difficult for ordinary people to go deep into the demon ghost region. It's normal that they don't know much about it. Yuji nodded and said slowly, the demon ghost region has a radius of tens of millions of miles, which is much larger than the Wuxia Empire. My general's sphere of influence is only a few thousand miles, and he is ruling it with a demon king. Demons are in charge of Yang and ghosts are in charge of Yin. Compared to the entire demon ghost territory which has a radius of tens of millions of miles, the territory of the general is only 1/10,000th of it. The same goes for the other demon kings and ghost kings. In this way, the territories of the 10 demon kings and ghost kings combined are only tens of thousands of miles. The demon ghost region has such a large area? Yu Qianqiu was surprised and couldn't help asking, does the rest of the land have a master? Meng Yan walked down from his seat and waved his hand. How can there be no master in such a great land? It's just that it's divided by a group of heroes. It's not as famous and powerful as the 10 ghost kings. If they unite, their strength is much greater than the 10 ghost kings. But once they are separated, they can't compare to any of us. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, in that case, why don't you lead your army to take over those territories one by one? You must know that to be a hero in life and a hero in death is something that is enviable. Live as a hero and die as a hero. Meng Yan muttered a few words and suddenly felt his heroic spirit soaring to the heavens. His eyes lit up but soon dimmed. He shook his head and said, I'm ashamed to say this. It's not that I don't want to, it's that I don't dare. Finished speaking, he smiled bitterly and didn't say another word. Yu Qianqiu guessed that the two of them had something to hide, but what did it have to do with him bringing them to Utopia? At this time Yu Ji took over and said, as Sir said before, we really can't leave the demon realm. If we can, with the strength of the army under General's command, it won't be difficult to change the Li clan's dynasty and make someone else the ruler. However, it's the same reason General is in the demon realm. It's not that we don't want to, but we don't dare. Yu Qianqiu sized up the two of them and asked suspiciously, could there be someone who can threaten General? Yu Ji and Meng Yan exchanged glances. The former nodded and said, there's indeed someone who can threaten General, and it's precisely because of his threat that the demon realm isn't in chaos. General's army doesn't dare to leave the demon realm, and the other demon ghost king also doesn't dare to act recklessly because of that person's threat. She paid special attention to the word person, and he in her tone, clearly telling Yu Qianqiu that the person who could intimidate the demons and ghosts within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers was not some powerful demon ghost king, but a living person. Who could have such a method? Yu Qianqiu's blood boiled when he heard this and he asked in a sonorous voice, who is it? Yu Ji looked nervous. She walked around the tent a few times and looked around from time to time, as if she was afraid that someone would hear what she said. Finally she bit her lip and said, go straight south from here and you can reach the center of the demon realm. There is a cultivator called by Changchun there. What? Yu Qianqiu exclaimed and took a step back, saying, cultivator? Are there really soul formation cultivators in this world? Yu Qianqiu's blood boiled again. Heavens! It turned out that immortality was not a legend but real. One must know that in the cultivation world, cultivation was generally divided into chi refining, foundation building, core formation, nascent soul, and tribulation passing. These 5 levels of cultivation, at the end of the tribulation passing stage, it was already very good to live for 700 to 800 years. Everyone pursued the path of cultivation to prolong their lives. Only the legendary soul formation stage was a realm that was hovering on the doorstep of immortality. If one could live for a few thousand years, what was the difference between that and immortality? But after all, it was a legend. Some were true and some were false. No one dared to guarantee it, and as time went by, it naturally became a legend. Yu Qianqiu was a person who had transmigrated. He believed that cultivation could prolong one's life, not to mention that he had already experienced it himself. But for the absurd thing of immortality, he would occasionally fantasize about it. Could a person really live forever? Live forever? He really couldn't find any scientific evidence, so he really didn't have any hope. But now, if what Yu Ji said was true, then what would happen? Yu Qianqiu asked again, is what Madame said true? The temptation of immortality was too great for humans, not to mention a cultivator who had the chance to set foot on the starting line. Of course it's true. Yu Ji smiled bitterly and said, actually he was the one who helped the Ghost King, one of the top 10 demons in the Ghost domain, rise to power and was crowned as one of the top 10. After all, it's impossible for him to worry about everything in the Ghost domain alone. That's why he helped us restrain the other heroes in the Ghost domain. Yes. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air. It looked like it was true. Even if he did not gain anything from this trip to the demon realm, just this piece of information was worth it. He now had a new goal to pursue. What does this have to do with you and your wife going to Utopia? Yu Qianqiu was puzzled. In fact, he already had an answer in his heart. Yu Ji's face was a little pale and she said with a trembling voice, there was once a ghost king who was infatuated with the mortal world when he was alive. He violated his rules and wanted to lead his subordinates into the human world. In the end, more than 100,000 people under the Ghost King were wiped out by him in an instant, and the Ghost King also ended up being destroyed, never to be reincarnated. Meng Yan sighed as well. It seemed that he too had a lingering fear. *CK. That's too powerful. More than 100,000 ghost cultivators were wiped out in an instant? Perhaps only a soul formation cultivator could have such a method. Yu Qianzhou's face twitched non-stop, and he looked at Yu Ji, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Madam, don't tell me the small favor you asked me to take you out of the ghost domain? These demons and ghosts were probably thinking about leaving the ghost domain all the time. After all, those who could reach the end of the tribulation transcendent stage, be it humans or demons or ghosts, would not want to be restrained, let alone be restrained by someone who could kill them at any time. But the key is that you guys bring your families with you when you go out. You don't just bring 1 or 2 people, you even want to bring your subordinates out. You want to dominate the outside world? If you really do that, the world will be in chaos. He now understood the thoughts of the soul formation cultivator by Changchun, which was to restrain these demons and ghosts here forever. It would be fine if they were obedient, but they would be killed without mercy if they were disobedient. There was no reason to reason with them. Yu Ji's expression also recovered at this time, and she smiled sweetly. Is Utopia in the ghost domain? Yu Qianzhou was speechless. It was not in the ghost domain, but it could also be said to be in the ghost domain because Utopia was with me. He smiled bitterly. Madam, you think too highly of me. Madam, you don't think that I have the ability to fight against a soul formation cultivator, do you? Chapter 117. Now he was ready to give up on asking for their help. This matter was too dangerous. It was easy to bring them out, but if Bai Changchun found out one day, who knew what the consequences would be? It was not a good thing to be targeted by a legendary figure. It would be easy to take his life. To put it bluntly, he was afraid that he would not even have time to hide in Utopia. Overruling him was just a matter of a thought. Who would dare to help him in supporting Immortal Island? Who would be able to help him then? Yu Ji suddenly covered her mouth and giggled. She laughed so hard that Yu Qianzhou and Meng Yan were a little confused. After a long time, she stopped and said with a smile, "Are you afraid, mister? Damn it. I wonder if there is Africa here? Anyway, your skin is soft and tender, I will let you laugh to your heart's content." Yu Qianzhou put on a fake smile and asked, "Aren't you afraid?" Yu Ji was startled and couldn't laugh anymore. She shook her head and said, "Mister, you worry too much. Of course, I understand that this matter can't be done easily. I just want a promise from Mister. As long as you promise to fulfill your promise when you have the ability in the future, it will be fine." After saying that, she stared at him with her big, seductive eyes. Promise? Another promise. I owe my Jianghu one, and now it's here again. Yu Qianzhou felt a headache when he heard the promise. He couldn't help but ask doubtfully, "How do you know that I will have the ability in the future? Don't you want to hear what I need your help with first? Aren't you afraid that you will be busy for nothing?" Yu Ji smiled. It was true that she was a female ghost with cultivation, but she was a woman who had experienced the prosperity of the world. She was a woman who was reluctant to leave the mortal world. She didn't want to stay in this drowsy place anymore. She didn't want to live a life where she could be destroyed at any time. After a year, 2 years, thousands of years, she really wanted to return to the human world. Although she couldn't walk in broad daylight due to the influence of the great law of heaven and earth, it was enough to sing and dance in the dim lights every night. Today, with Yu Qianzhou's zither in hand, he took the lead, completely evoking her long-hidden desire. When she was alive, she sang and danced to celebrate peace. If not me, who would take the lead? Although she was tempted, there was a powerful existence in the demon realm that made her tremble. She was helpless, until Yu Qianzhou casually summoned a female demon in the late tribulation passing stage. Not only was the demon more beautiful than her, but the most unbearable thing was that while they were in the demon realm, she could leave at will and go wherever she wanted. From the conversation between Yu Qianzhou and her, it was obvious that there was a group of people who were more powerful than her, and a group of people who had a higher chance of entering the Huashan realm. Since Yu Qianzhou could easily summon such a figure with such a powerful background, Yu Ji's heart became active again. This might be an opportunity for her to leave this place that she had hated for thousands of years. No matter whether she could succeed or not, it was better to have hope than to have no hope. If Yu Qianzhou knew her thoughts, in addition to feeling sad for Meng Yan, he would also sigh. Women in his previous life and this life were all the same. Women who were used to wandering around the brothels were too wild and not suitable to be his wife. At least, he would not feel at ease as a pretty daughter of a humble family. As long as it doesn't make things too difficult for us, I and the general can agree to help Mr. with a small favor. Since Mr. is so talented, you must be a person who keeps his promises. No matter if you can do it in the future, I just want Mr. to promise me. After Yu finished speaking, she saw that Yu Qianqiu was still hesitating. She immediately decided to increase the bargaining chip. She took a token from her waist and handed it over with a smile. This token is for Mr. In the future, within a radius of thousands of miles, as long as Mr. uses this token, no matter if it is a demon or a ghost, they will have to give you some face. Damn. This is a good thing. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously reached out to take it and stroked it. TSK. I heard that there are a lot of good spiritual herbs for alchemy in the demon ghost territory. Some good spiritual herbs that have long been extinct outside. Meng Yan suddenly opened his eyes wide. He really didn't understand why Madame would do such a thing. Could Yu Qianqiu help them out of the demon ghost territory? Was it worth giving away his Ghost King's token? Wouldn't Yu Qianqiu be able to do whatever he wanted here in the future? He immediately wanted to stop her. Yu might know him too well. While Yu Qianqiu was not paying attention, she turned back and shook her head slightly. She winked at him, telling him that she would explain to him, but not now. Meng Yan paused. He remembered that Madame always had her own opinions. She must have some other intentions by doing this, so he didn't say anything. Since Madame is so kind, this, that. Yu Qianqiu mumbled and thought to himself, damn it. He would be an idiot if he didn't take such an obvious benefit. He immediately put away the token and promised solemnly, I promised Madame that when I have the ability, I will definitely bring you and your wife to Utopia. Even if you and your wife want to stay there for a long time, I can guarantee that the people there will definitely not reject the two of you. He specifically emphasized that it was a virtuous couple, just the two of them. He didn't want to take his entire army with him. Of course, since he had already said that he had the ability, he wouldn't mind taking them with him if he could be of use to his army in the future. Yuji's eyes lit up. The fact that the other party could add a hidden chess piece to his promise meant that he was someone who valued promises. He would not easily agree to things that he could not do, which made her feel more at ease. As for whether he would bring everyone away, it was not something she cared about. However, Yu Qianqiu saw that Meng Yan's face had already darkened. Clearly he had already understood what he meant. It seemed like it was a little too much for him to take something that was not even a semi-finished product from him. Furthermore, something like the token could not be used just because the other party gave the order. It was not too safe. Ahem. Yu Qianqiu coughed and added to Yuji, as long as Madame's words are valid, you can take my words as an oath. What he meant was that as long as her words were valid, then he would have sworn to her just now. Cultivators would really suffer retribution if they made random oaths. However, if her words were not valid, then he could pretend that he did not say anything just now. Yu Qianqiu concluded that Yuji must be plotting something. Otherwise, she would not be so eager to throw herself at him. Yuji was even happier that he could say something like an oath. She chuckled and walked to Meng Yan's side. She pulled his arm and said, General, it seems that Mr. is afraid that my words are not valid. I hope that General will agree to it personally. The displeasure on Meng Yan's face disappeared in an instant. He nodded to Yu Qianqiu and said, Mr. Please rest assured. Madame and I are one. Madame's words are my words. If there is anything that you need my help with, you can tell me now. Haha, General indeed has the demeanor of a general. Straightforward enough. Yu Qianqiu complimented. However, he glanced at Yuji from the corner of his eyes. This pillow talk is really powerful. You must remember. You must encourage yourself. Don't sink into it. He laughed in his heart. He remembered that his old enemy Yan Shu was hiding somewhere. He collected his thoughts and asked indifferently, Great General, other than the disciples of the various sects in this military camp, there are also many people hiding in the surroundings. I believe that General already knows about this. How does General intend to deal with this? Meng Yan suddenly stood up and laughed cruelly. If Mr. didn't remind me, this General would have almost forgotten. I gave them an hour, but they actually turned a deaf ear to my words. Could it be that they still think they can get lucky? Very good. There is actually someone here who dares to not take my words seriously. As soon as he said this, he revealed a ferocious expression. Chapter 118. Yuji covered her mouth and giggled again. She helped Meng Yan up and said, General, don't be anxious. Since Mr. has asked, I'm afraid it has something to do with what we need help with. Mister, do you think I'm right? The last sentence was directed at Yu Qianqiu. Tsk tisk. Yu Qianqiu shook his head regretfully. He gave a thumbs up and praised, Madam is really smart. I can't hide anything from you. That's right. The small favor that I need General and Madam's help has something to do with these people. Yu Ji looked ashamed. Meng Yin, on the other hand, was quite proud. To him, there was no difference between praising his wife and praising himself. He nodded and said, How do you want me to help? Just say it, mister. Yu Qianqiu gnashed his teeth and said, When we first arrived at Fey Sinister Realm, those fellows clearly knew that there was danger, but they didn't warn us. Not only did they not warn us, but they actually ignored our friendship and left us behind. Fortunately, we encountered the great general, otherwise. In short, I really can't swallow this anger. Tsk. Meng Yin laughed and said, So it's a group of selfish people who abandoned their friends and ran away. Very good. This general will definitely help you. What does Mr. want? He was a seasoned soldier, and the thing he hated the most was people who abandoned their comrades and fled in the face of battle. Yu Qianqiu said in a deep voice, General, please help me capture every single one of them. It's best if they're all alive. I want to do it myself and let them taste the feeling of living a life worse than death. That's right, General. It's best to find a big tent and lock them up. It's really inconvenient to let the disciples outside see what we're doing. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain myself when I return. Ah. Meng Yin laughed heartily. He gave Yu Qianqiu a look as if he knew him very well. He then dragged his golden armor and walked out of the tent in big strides. Mister. Yu Qianqiu was just about to follow Meng Yin out when he heard Yu Ji calling him. He turned around and asked, What's the matter, madam? The latter didn't say a word. When she walked past him, she pursed her lips into a smile and walked out of the tent as if saying, I know what you're planning. This caused Yu Qianqiu to be filled with rage. Damn it. Forget it if you think you can pinch. What I hate the most is this kind of pretentious, self-righteous dog that doesn't eat shit. When he walked out of the tent, he happened to see Ghost General Meng Yin wave his hand, and dozens of riders led a group of people out of the camp. When he saw Yu Qianqiu, he only nodded slightly. He swayed and returned to the crowd standing at the foot of the stage. He ignored the questioning gazes from the disciples and closed his eyes to rest. Before long, the sounds of fighting suddenly appeared in the surroundings. At the top of the mountain, the expressions of the leading elders of the 6 great sects darkened. The scattered divine sense spots on the 6 divine sense compasses moved almost at the same time. There was no doubt that they were being attacked by an organized group, or else this would not have happened. At this moment, who else could organize an attack against hundreds of disciples from the various sects but Ghost General? Dongfang Chang'ao, what do you mean? Qiu Wuyuan asked for his opinion with a gloomy expression. Here, his 10,000 demons and supporting Immortal Island were undoubtedly the absolute leaders of the righteous and evil sections. Their opinions were basically the opinions of the 3 sections. Dongfang Chang'ao frowned. Although many disciples from the various sects would die every time they came here, it was also for the future development of the sections. If all of them died here, it would shock the 6 great sections. At the very least, they would have to consider whether they could use this method of training disciples again in the future. Seeing that he did not speak, Qiu Wuyuan said in a deep voice, I suggest that everyone go down the mountain and save the disciples of the 6 sections. Save as many as you can. Everyone stared at Dongfang Chang'ao. As long as he agreed, the righteous and evil sects would have reached an agreement. Dongfang Chang'ao frowned. Even if we go down, can we save them? I need to consult the sect before making a decision. Qiu Wuyuan sneered. Consult the sect? By the time your supporting Immortal Island sends people here, it will be too late. By then they won't be saving people but collecting corpses. But it makes sense. Your supporting Immortal Island is rich and has many powerful people. A few disciples dying is nothing. Elder Quan of supporting Immortal Island could not take it anymore. He immediately shouted, Qiu Wuyuan, are you looking for trouble? Qiu Wuyuan glanced at him coldly and said with disdain, Who do you think you are? Since when did supporting Immortal Island have the right to speak? Once he said that, the other elders of supporting Immortal Island immediately surrounded him and cheered him on. Once supporting Immortal Island made a move, the 10,000 demons did not want to be outdone. The elders also surrounded him. As a result, the other 4 sects helped their own sides. The righteous and evil sects instantly stood against each other. Qiu Wuyuan. Dongfang Chang'ao glared at him. His white hair and beard moved even though there was no wind. He said coldly, "Supporting Immortal Island's cultivation pavilion has never been afraid of anyone. If you want to cause trouble, look at the situation now. After this matter is over, I will welcome you at any time." He immediately shouted at the elders, "Help me send a message." The elders unwillingly retreated and surrounded him, placing their palms on his body. Dongfang Chang'ao raised a jade stone and infused the power of 10 people into it. Instantly the jade stone gave off a dazzling white light. After muttering a few incantations, the jade stone turned into dust with a "pa" sound. Everyone from the various sects secretly sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Qiu Weiyuan's brows couldn't help but twitch. An ordinary voice transmission could be done as long as one's cultivation had reached the tribulation passing stage. However, a voice transmission that was thousands of miles away wasn't something that could be done by just gathering a few people. It required the combined strength of a few people to reach the tribulation passing stage. The other sects questioned themselves. They didn't have the ability to do so, including the 10,000 demons. After the people of supporting Immortal Island dispersed, they acted like it was no big deal. This shocked the other sects even more. Dongfang Chang'ao nodded at everyone and said, "The message has been sent to my Heaven Heart Pavilion. Later there will be." He suddenly paused and closed his eyes to focus. After a while, he opened his eyes and looked at everyone. "My Heaven Heart Pavilion has sent a decree from the sect master. Disciples of supporting Immortal Island, please be calm and don't act rashly. Heaven Heart Pavilion has sent 6 final stage crossing tribulation stage experts to come here at top speed." The 9 elders of supporting Immortal Island were delighted. They bowed and said, "We will follow the sect master's decree." The elders of the other sects looked at each other in dismay. As expected of the supporting Immortal Island, it was worthy of being the #1 sect in the world. Just a casual move was enough to send out 6 consecrators at the final stage of the crossing of tribulations. Qiu Weiyuan snorted coldly and didn't say anything. After all, it was unrealistic to rely on the 3 demonic sects to go down the mountain and rescue people without the help of the righteous sections. Moreover, 6 of the supporting Immortal Island's consecrators were coming here at top speed. With their cultivation they would arrive very soon. Not good. Everyone look. A Deluo sect elder pointed at the divine sense compass and shouted. Everyone couldn't be bothered with the small conflict that had just happened. They gathered together to watch. The disciples of the various sects who were hiding in the surroundings gathered together. Moreover, the divine sense light spots were dimmer. It was obvious that they were all injured. Ghost General is so powerful. He actually captured all of them. Dongfang Chang'ao. Qiu Weiyuan retracted his gaze from the divine sense compass. He raised his head and sneered. Now, all the sects are counting on the 6 consecrators of supporting Immortal Island. I hope they will arrive soon. Otherwise we will have to collect their corpses. Chapter 119. One by one, the disciples of the 6 sects were escorted into the military camp by the ghost soldiers and generals. They staggered as they walked and all of them had injuries on their bodies. They looked dispirited and there were close to 400 of them. The disciples who took the initiative to visit looked at the seniors who were captured with different expressions. It was hard to tell if they were gloating or pitying them. They could only watch as they were locked up in a few big tents. As for what would happen next, no one knew. After Yu Qianzhou's gaze found his old enemy in the crowd, he retracted it without stopping. He wiped away the smile on his face and turned to the crowd, shaking his head and sighing. Sigh. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. I'll go and beg the general to let them off. As he spoke, he staggered towards the central tent. Not a single ghost soldier or general stopped him. Actually, none of the disciples of the 6 sects wanted him to plead for them. However, they could only keep their thoughts to themselves and not say it out loud. When Meng Yan saw Yu Qianzhou enter, he chuckled. Everyone's dantian is sealed and they can't fight back. Mister, if you have something to do, you can go and do your own thing. No one will disturb you. Yu Qianzhou chuckled and cupped his hands to thank him. He turned around and walked out. He came to a big tent where the disciples of the 6 sects were locked up and looked around. As expected, he didn't see any of Meng Yan's subordinates. The people who were locked up lifted their heads weakly and were shocked when they saw the person who came. Some of them had even met Yu Qianzhou at the peak of the mountain. How could this disciple of Fuxian Island come and go as he pleased? Yu Qianzhou couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense and there was no need for him to. After contacting Bai Sujin in Utopia, He immediately made his move, and the people he touched disappeared one by one. He clapped his hands and looked around at the empty tent. Expressionlessly, he went to the next tent and did the same thing. Finally, he entered the tent where Xianxia was locked in. Under the latter's terrified gaze, he cleared everyone around him and stood in front of him. He rolled up his sleeves and smiled. "Martial Uncle Yen, I finally get to see you. I've been waiting for this day for a long time. So I can finally resolve one of my worries." Xianxia was inexplicably terrified. He staggered backwards. "Yu Qianqiu, what are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu walked over and gave him a heavy slap, causing him to fall to the ground. He then jumped up and stomped on Xianxia, cursing. "Fuck, do you think you can call my name so casually?" Xianxia howled as he crawled everywhere. His dantian was now sealed, and his body was only slightly better than a normal person's. How could he endure the punches and kicks of Yu Qianqiu chasing after him? His nose and mouth were bleeding non-stop. After a while, Yu Qianqiu straightened his back and let out a deep breath. "It feels so good to beat my enemy. Fuck, I haven't felt so good in a long time." He stretched his chest, clenched his fists and loosened his muscles. He rolled up his fallen sleeves again. This time he rolled them up high to prevent them from falling again. He walked over to Xianxia, who was hiding under the long table, and gave him a slap. Then he smiled. "Now you know what I'm going to do, right? Based on our good relationship, what do you think I'm going to do? Of course I'm going to *CKU. Xianxia, who had been beaten out of shape, had blood all over his face. He mumbled, "Yu Qianqiu, if you dare to treat me like this, my father won't let you go." What if King Genius? Yu Qianqiu sneered. "You idiot who won't let who go. You're already in your 70s or 80s, yet you still bring up your old bastard father to scare people. You better think about what last words you want me to pass on to your father." With a "pa" sound, Xianxia's nose was smashed flat. Blood splattered everywhere. Yu Qianqiu's blood-stained hands became even more bloody. "Quick, call me father. Maybe I'll let you go if I'm in a good mood." Yu Qianqiu pulled his blood-stained clothes and shouted. Then he slapped Xianxia again and shouted, "Bastard, why are you pretending to be dead? Call me father now." Huff, huff. Xianxia, who could no longer breathe through his nose, could only use his mouth to breathe. His teeth had all fallen off. He desperately raised his head that was hanging to one side. Suddenly, with a "pu" sound, he spat a mouthful of blood on Yu Qianqiu's face. "You're courting death." Yu Qianqiu roared. With a "yes" sound, he pulled Xianxia's head and gave him a heavy punch. The latter's head made a crisp sound and drooped on his back. He was no longer breathing. Yu Qianqiu, who was in a rage, did not notice that he was already dead. He pressed Xianxia to the ground unwillingly and punched him until his head was smashed into pieces. Only then did he stand up. He raised his arm to wipe the blood off his face. His sleeve was instantly dyed red. His blood-stained face looked a little ferocious. He looked at the corpse on the ground and murmured, "I think Shenfeng said that human skin is a good material for making high-class talismans. I can't waste it." He lifted his leg and the corpse disappeared without a trace. A pool of blood was left on the ground. He did not see his current image. He put down his sleeves and patted his clothes. Instead, he walked out of the tent as if nothing had happened. He walked towards the main tent. As soon as he entered, he found Meng Yan and Yu Ji staring at him blankly. He had also come to his senses now. Just now, he was immersed in the pleasure of killing his enemy with his own hands. He was in high spirits and did not care about the blood on his body at all. Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly. "I really did it by accident." Did it by accident? Did he accidentally get it all over his body? What did this guy do to those people? Meng Yan and Yu Ji exchanged glances. After the former asked someone to bring him to take a bath, the couple went to the 3 big tents together. They were all empty except for one of the big tents that was covered with blood. Where were the people? Where did they go? They also called the ghost soldiers outside to ask. They all said that they did not see any prisoners coming out. They only heard screams coming from inside. The two of them looked at each other in dismay. They knew that there were some cultivators in this world who would cultivate some demonic arts and evil techniques. However, in such a short period of time, nearly 400 people were turned into nothingness. It was a little too terrifying. Just thinking about it made the two of them shudder. This kid was a little evil. After taking a bath, Yu Qianqiu felt comfortable all over. Moreover, he had killed Xianxia. He felt refreshed. He took out a set of clothes from his storage bag and put them on. Then he returned to the main tent. He took a few steps forward and cupped his hands in greeting to the couple sitting behind the main table. Thank you, great general and madam, for letting me vent my anger. You're welcome, mister. Meng Yin raised his hand and gestured for him to sit down. He smiled and said, "It's fate that I can meet you today. Unfortunately, sigh. The sky is getting brighter. It's not convenient for me to ask you to stay." Yu Qianzhou also knew that no matter how powerful Meng Yin and the others were, they would not dare to come out in broad daylight. This was the restriction of the laws of heaven and earth. Otherwise, their souls would definitely be destroyed. He nodded and asked, "Is General going to break camp?" "Yes." Meng Yin raised his hand and pointed to the south. He said, 8,000 miles to the south, there is a canyon called Valley of Yin Wind. It is my headquarters. Mister, if you have time, please come and visit. Thank you, great general. If that's the case, I'll take my leave. I'll definitely pay you a visit another day. Yu Qianzhou stood up and said, now was not the time to talk. If he stayed any longer, he would only bring trouble to them. The laws of heaven and earth were merciless. Please. Meng Yin raised his hand. Then he and Yuji saw him off. Below the stage, Yu Qianzhou once again turned around to thank the two of them. Then he quickly led the disciples of the 6 sects out of the camp. Break camp. With a command, everyone in the camp started to move. Not long after, they were ready. The army from the world of spirits and souls disappeared in front of the disciples of the 6 sections. Those disciples from the other sects who were captured were also nowhere to be seen. Yu Qianzhou looked back at the crowd and smiled bitterly. Those seniors didn't show up in an hour, which angered the ghost general. It was useless no matter how much I tried. In the end, they all sighed. The crowd was already very grateful to him for surviving the disaster. Moreover, they were not interested in those seniors from the other sections. Hence, they all comforted him and advised him not to blame himself. Chapter 120. Yu Qianzhou looked at everyone with a bleak expression. He kept shaking his head and blaming himself, but he was complaining in his heart. He wanted to ask the ghost general to help him take these people away, but he still had many things to rely on Fuxian Island to do. Moreover, the old farts on the mountain had a Bulsh *T divine sense compass. If he went back alone, he would definitely arouse suspicion. However, there were benefits to keeping these people. At least it could prove that the hundreds of disciples from various sects had nothing to do with him. Forget it. It was not bad to get a group of nascent soul and core formation stage cultivators. At least they were stronger than these people who were mostly in the foundation establishment stage. It would save him more energy to help them improve their cultivation. He could think about the rest later. Everyone, brothers and sisters from various sects, please listen to me. Yu Qianzhou seemed to have thought it through instantly. He shouted to everyone, everyone disperse. It's only been a day. There's still a long way to go. Everyone take care. After that, he waved at Ko Xuanhuan, the girls, and Gu Qingyun. Let's go. They nodded and followed him into the depths of the demon ghost region. After walking for a short while, they realized that something was wrong. They looked back and saw a group of female disciples from the Moon clan not far behind them. Behind them were disciples from various sections. They were following them at a distance that was neither too close nor too far away. It was the first time these people came to the demon ghost region. As for those who had experienced, they were all taken into Utopia by Yu Qianzhou. Hearing that they were going to disperse, they immediately felt that something was missing. The demon ghost region before the sky was completely dark, looked gloomy and terrifying. Everyone didn't know where to go. The disciples of the Moon clan were all women. Subconsciously, they followed Yu Qianzhou, who they thought was strong. After all, Yu Qianzhou's performance that night was too strong. He wasn't even afraid of the ghost general. It should be much safer to follow him. After all, women naturally liked to follow men who gave them a sense of security. After this night, Yu Qianzhou seemed to have become the backbone of the disciples of the various sections. The disciples of the various sects already wanted to follow. At first, they were still hesitating. Seeing that the Moon clan was following, they naturally followed suit. Just like that, everyone followed from a distance. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Why are you following us? The disciples of the various sects gathered together again and suddenly felt very safe. No one answered him. After a while, a female disciple of the Moon clan pouted and said, "The demon ghost region is so big. How can you say that we will follow you? We can go whichever way we want. How could it be so coincidental?" Yu Qianzhou thought about it for a bit and understood. They were afraid. However, it felt good to be able to be relied on by others. If you were afraid, just say it. But this girl was still so stubborn. Yu Qianzhou smiled slightly and wanted to tease them. He nodded and said, "So it was us who blocked your way." Then he smiled at Gu Qingyun and the others. "Let's make way. Let the sisters of the Moon Clan go first." They smiled and made way for him. The female disciples of the Moon Clan were instantly embarrassed. They didn't know whether to leave or stay. In the end, the stubborn female disciple said to a slightly older girl beside her, "Senior sister, let's go. Otherwise people will look down on the Moon Clan." Then she was about to pull her forward. The senior sister stopped her and said, "Don't talk nonsense. The Moon Clan has always been on good terms with Fuxin Island." She turned around and bowed to Yu Qianqiu. Lan Xinyue, the 19th generation disciple of the Moon Clan, greets senior brother Yu. "Don't mention it." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands casually and said, "Although she was pretty, there were many beautiful girls in the cultivation world. If they weren't outstanding, there was nothing special about them." Lan Xinyue smiled and said, "Senior brother Yu, you are very talented. Please don't mind my junior sister. We have just entered the demon region and we are in a precarious situation. If you have any good suggestions, please enlighten us." Those words are pleasing to the ear. Yu Qianqiu nodded, then turned to the stubborn woman and roared fiercely, "Girl, if you have nothing better to do, learn from your eldest senior sister. If you speak nonsense again in the future, you'll suffer greatly sooner or later." You. The female disciple was about to fight back but was dragged back by her peers. Yu Qianqiu didn't want to talk to her anymore. He cupped his hands at the disciples and said, "It was pure coincidence that we met the ghost general when he was out on patrol. I don't think something like this will happen again. The sky is about to brighten. It will be the world of all kinds of demons soon. We will be too big a target if we stay together. It will be safer if we disperse. It will be best if we find a place where no one can find us. In fact, I am also in a precarious situation. I can't solve it by playing the guqin with any demon. It is also dangerous for you to follow me. Take care of yourselves." That was all. No matter if they listened to him or not, he couldn't lead them around the demon region. So what if he protected them? They would go their separate ways after they left the demon region. How many people would remember him? It was the world of cultivation. That was it. "Let's go." Yu Qianqiu disappeared in front of everyone with his companions. Everyone thought about it and felt that what he said made sense. Instantly, it became lively, and a new round of forming teams and groups began. The elders of the 6 major sects on the mountain peak looked very gloomy. From the divine sense compass, they could see that the light spots of the captured disciples had all disappeared. According to common sense, this meant that they were all dead. What a heavy loss. There was no doubt that these disciples were the elites of the various sections. What was strange was that the disciples who had gathered together seemed to be fine. Now they had scattered. Whoosh! A few sharp sounds of fast flying came from afar. When everyone looked up, they found that there were 6 elders on the mountain peak. The one in the lead was Ma Jianghu, who was holding a walking stick. Obviously, the 6 elders of the supporting immortal island had arrived. The elders of the various sects were secretly shocked. As expected of an expert at the late stage of the crossing tribulation, they traveled thousands of kilometers in just a few hours. Moreover, they were flying in the sky without any support. What a profound cultivation and fast speed. Dongfang Chang'eo was also shocked. How come even the oldest Ma Jianghu of the supporting immortal island had come? He quickly led the other 9 elders to salute and said, "Greetings, Jianghu, greetings, 6 elders." The other sects, regardless of whether it was the righteous or evil Tao, went over to greet them. In any case, their age and cultivation were there. Ma Jianghu gently poked him with her walking stick and said in a deep voice, "Chang'eo, tell me what happened." Dongfang Chang'eo nodded and immediately explained the ins and outs of the matter. After listening, Ma Jianghu said in a deep voice, "There's no time to lose. The 6 sects will split up to save people. I will stay with the supporting immortal island. The 5 of you will go to 1 sect each and save as many as you can." The 5 elders and 5 elders behind her agreed. At this moment, even the bad-tempered Qiu Weiyuan didn't dare to act recklessly in front of these people. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.